Chapter 747. Although Chu Feiling and his wife had lost their child, they could still forget about her when they didn't see each other, or when they were busy. They had hope in their hearts. As long as they found her, their child would be fine, and there would always be hope in their hearts. On the other hand, the third brother and his wife stayed by their daughter's side all the time. They saw their daughter's pain, her convulsions and her suffering, but they couldn't do anything about it. They knew that it was hopeless, but they still stayed by her side. They were like criminals on death row who knew when they would be beheaded. They were waiting for that day in vain, but they couldn't do anything about it. No, they were even worse off than criminals on death row, because they still had to work hard, desperately accumulate all their wealth, desperately use all their means to stop this death that they knew was unstoppable. Parents in the world had a pitiful heart. Chu Feiyan and Duan Shuyi used their lives, souls and all their hard work to realize this sentence. Even if it meant that their child could live for another 15 minutes, they were still willing to give up everything. Now, Duan Shuyi was accompanying her child at home, heartbroken, while Chu Feiyan was still frantically searching for her in some unknown mountain. Yang Ruolin and Duan Shuyi sighed at each other. If you are not a parent, you will not know the hardships of raising a child. If you are not a parent, you will not know the kindness of a parent. In this world, who knew how many parents like this? Who knew how many more were there? Chu Yang brought Chu Lu'er into the inner chamber. He smiled and pointed to the bed. Lu'er, be good. Lie down on the bed. I'll treat your illness. You'll be fine in a while. Chu Lu'er tilted her head and looked at him. She actually smiled gently. Big brother, although I'm young, you don't have to coax me like a child. Chu Yang was stunned. Huh? Chu Lu'er revealed a look of arrogance between her brows. At this moment, this thin and weak body actually revealed its sharpness. She smiled faintly and said, Big brother, ever since I could feel pain, I've been going back and forth in the 18 levels of hell every day. She raised her eyebrows and smiled sadly but proudly. In this world, I'm probably the only one who can survive like me, right? Chu Yang looked at her deeply and said, That's right, Lu'er. In terms of strength, you're the strongest I've ever seen. He added another sentence in his heart. Even if you include the seniors, you are still the one and only. Chu Lu'er smiled. Big brother, I was able to survive because firstly, I couldn't leave father and mother. The moment I thought of leaving them forever, I trained myself with all my might, endured the pain with all my might, and accepted the cruelest treatment and pain with all my might. Just so that, when I'm done with the pain, I can tell my mother, Mother, I'm not in pain anymore. At that time, a smile appeared on Mother's face. Although it's bleak, every time I see it, I feel very happy. The pain is worth it. Also, when my mother hugged me, the warm smell of her body made me drunk. This was the second. Therefore, even though I knew that every day I lived was another day of torture for my mother and myself, I still couldn't bear to die. Because I'm afraid. I've heard that the world is dark and cold. There's no one to accompany you, and you're all alone. So I'm afraid. I don't dare to go. Big brother, don't you think I'm very selfish? Chu Lu'er sat down leisurely in front of Chu Yang. Her frail back was actually very straight. His eyes, which were originally lifeless, were now shining brightly. You're not selfish. Chu Yang's throat moved a little. He swallowed a mouthful of saliva. After organizing his words in his mind for a long time, he said slowly, You're not selfish. Third uncle and third aunt have given up everything for you, just so that you can live on. You're right. Every day you live is a day of torture for them. But as long as you're alive, they'll feel motivated to work hard for you. If you give up and die, third uncle and third aunt indeed won't have to endure such torture in the future. But the pain you leave behind will torment their own generation. Because you should have lived to 13 years old, but you didn't. They'll feel that they've let you down. Remember, Lu'er, only this kind of inner guilt is the greatest torture in a person's life. After Chu Yang said this deeply, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Qingwu, if not for the guilt from my previous life, how could I be like this in this life? Big brother, what you said is really good. Chu Lu'er clearly became more cheerful after hearing these words. She actually smiled sincerely and said, I've always felt that I'm very selfish and also very guilty. Does this mean that I'm not? No. But even so, your strength has made up for everything. Chu Yang said deeply. You have to know that you were injured in your mother's womb. Third uncle and third aunt already feel that they owe you. If you continue, won't they really be in so much pain that they wish they were dead? Chu Luer's thin eyebrows furrowed. After thinking hard for a long time, she finally stood up quietly and bowed deeply to Chu Yang. She said, Big brother, thank you. She raised her head and looked at Chu Yang. Her eyes were clear and bright. She said, Big brother, do you know that in such a family with parents, uncles, big brother, and now you, it's really very blissful. Such a family, even if it's poor, even if it makes me feel 1,000 times or 10,000 times the pain now, I can't bear to leave. Chu Luer said. Chu Yang's heart ached. He said gently, Luer, I promise that you'll never leave. Chu Luer said with tears in her eyes, Big brother, treat my injuries. With tears in her eyes, she smiled mischievously. I didn't believe that you could treat me at first, but now, I believe you. Chu Yang smiled and scratched her nose. He scolded, Little rascal. Chu Luer giggled. Chu Yang realized that once this little girl smiled sincerely, there was actually a different charm to her. Her eyebrows first moved a little, and then the bridge of her nose wrinkled up slightly. At the same time, her lips curled up slightly like spring flowers blooming. As Chu Yang instructed the sword spirit to prepare, he said sincerely, Luer, you'll definitely be a great beauty when you grow up. I don't know how many people will be charmed by you. Chu Luer held her hands in front of her chest and said happily, Really? Really? Chu Yang nodded affirmatively. And at this time, the sword spirit had also finished the preparations. Chu Yang helped Chu Luer to lie down on his bed slowly. He smiled and asked, Just now you mentioned your pillars. I wonder if there's a third pillar? Chu Yang was originally joking, but after he said that, Chu Luer actually sat up straight and said seriously, Yes, big brother, the third pillar is that I feel that I'm the most amazing person in the world. She smiled proudly, with a sense of disdain for the heavens and the pride of looking down on all the men in the world. She raised her little neck slightly and said, Every day, I walk back and forth in the land of hell from the 1st to the 18th level. Every time I walk, I'll be tortured once. I've been like this for 11 years and 2 months. And I've been hanging for 18 hours every day for 3 days. Chu Yang couldn't help but be shocked. She remembered it so clearly. Chu Luer smiled and said, Big brother, I was born in the wee hours of the morning. I remember my birthday well. I want to know how long I can bear it. But no matter how long I can bear it, I'm afraid there's no one in history who can bear the pain like me. Even a supreme martial artist can't do it. This is my greatest pride. Although it's painful, I'm filled with a sense of accomplishment. It's this pride and sense of accomplishment that supports me to bear it day by day. As long as the heavens don't take me away by force, I'll continue to bear it day by day. Big brother, I'm actually very proud. Chu Luer smiled lightly and lay back. She even stretched. It's so comfortable. Big brother, your bed is even softer than mine. Chu Yang looked at her in a daze. He faintly felt that if his sister was really cured, she would definitely become a terrifying figure in the world of the heavens in the future. Not for anything else but for this tenacity. She was only 11 years old, but not only was she strong, she was also tenacious. The rarest thing was that in such a place of torture that was crueler than hell, she could actually still find happiness and a sense of accomplishment. This was already an inconceivable matter. And on the basis of all this, she could still reflect on herself and look down on the world. She already had all the conditions to become a peerless expert, and had far surpassed them. Once her chronic illness was cured, she would be a hidden dragon rising to the heavens. No one would be able to stop her from advancing. In the space of the tribulation, the sword spirit looked at Chu Luer quietly and said solemnly, Chu Yang, do you know that when she was talking to you, her condition was gradually worsening? Her head was hurting more and more. Did you see that? Chu Yang took a breath. No. The sword spirit nodded and made a clear conclusion. Chu Yang, your sister is the most terrifying person among all the people I've seen in the past 10,000 years. Only then did Chu Yang exhale the breath that he had just taken in. He said quietly, I'm proud of her. The two of them didn't talk any more nonsense. Chu Yang stood quietly and held Chu Luer's wrist. Somehow, there seemed to be a shadow that came out of his body and entered Chu Luer's body through the meridians on her wrist. Then extremely carefully, it climbed up to the position of her brain. It disappeared. Chu Luer moaned in pain and lost all consciousness. Outside, Duan Shiyi's eyes were fixed on the door of the inner chamber. She was restless. The two brothers, Chu Feiling and Chu Fian, sat opposite each other. It was as if there were nails under their buttocks. After sitting for a while, they would get up and walk around with their hands behind their backs. Or they would simply go out and patrol around the room before coming back in. The four of them didn't even dare to speak. Inside, Chu Yang seemed to be talking to Chu Luer, but their voices were muffled. Even if they used their martial arts, they couldn't hear what they were saying. This was the sword spirit's doing. With the sword spirit's cultivation, as long as he didn't want anyone to hear something, even a supreme martial artist could only stare helplessly. But if he wanted someone to hear it, even if they covered their ears or became deaf, they would still be able to hear it clearly. The four of them listened for a long time, but couldn't hear anything. They were all very surprised. They were clearly talking, but at such a close distance, even a monarch-level expert could only hear muffled words. This was unbelievable. After a long time, they suddenly heard a soft chuckle from inside. Although the sound was soft and inaudible, it could be heard clearly. Chapter 748. Although this voice was soft, it was indeed Chu Luer's voice. Furthermore, there was no pain in her laughter. It was filled with joy from the bottom of her heart. This was a joyous laughter that couldn't be faked at all. Duan Shiyi's entire body was trembling. Her tears were falling like rain. She had forgotten her feelings and grabbed Yang Ruolan's hand. She had used so much strength that it hurt Yang Ruolan's hand. She repeatedly said, "Sister-in-law, did you hear that? Did you hear that? It's Luer." Luer smiled. Luer smiled. Yang Ruolan was also excited. She muttered, It's Luer." Duan Shiyi sobbed and couldn't form a sound. Luer has never smiled like this in the past 11 years. Today she actually smiled. She smiled so happily. "Sister-in-law, I'm really satisfied to be able to hear such a laugh in my life. I'm so happy." As she spoke, she couldn't stop her tears from falling. She said, "If Fain could hear it, I believe that even if he's in the 100,000 mountains, he'd be gratified and happy." Chu Feiling's expression dimmed. He couldn't help but feel sad when he thought of how his third brother was still wandering around some barren mountains surrounded by clouds. The continuous clouds, the sky-reaching mountains, the dangerous valleys, the ferocious beasts, and the unpredictable human heart. Over the past 11 years, it didn't dispel his third brother's determination to seek medicine for his daughter. I wonder where third brother is at this moment? But he was still in the misty mountain range, searching for that illusory hope that was destined to be extinguished. The young child who followed behind him and called him Big Brother back then had now grown into an indomitable man. Even though this process was so bitter and bitter, when everyone heard this laughter, it was as if they had heard the sound of nature. Everyone's eyes were a little red, and their minds were a little dazed. For so many years they had waited for such a laugh. How long had they waited? How much had they sacrificed for this laugh? Everyone stood there in a daze, deep in thought. Only Duan Shiyi's soft sobs could be heard in the room. She was still holding Yang Ruolan's hand. Her body was so weak that she almost fainted. "Sister-in-law, Yang can make Luer laugh like that. I'm willing to do anything for him." Yang Ruolan sighed deeply. She didn't know what to say. She only felt that her throat was blocked. So, she held Yang Ruolan's hand tightly. In the inner chamber, Chu Yang's mind was tightly connected with the sword spirit. It was as if he could see it. The sword spirit first entered Chu Luer's meridians, and then followed her meridians to a pitch-black space. To Chu Yang's surprise, this space was brimming with vitality. The sword spirit sighed. "This little girl's strength can be seen at this moment. Even a perfectly healthy person might not have such vitality. However, this vitality is like water without roots." Then, the sword spirit stretched out his hand. When his two hands reached out of his sleeves, they transformed into thousands of rays of golden light. It was as if a heavenly deity had suddenly descended. Then he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He raised both his hands at the same time and made complicated gestures. Following his gestures, lightning flashed and thunder roared in the entire space. Rays of golden light shot out and disappeared into the corners of this space without a trace. Chuyang counted carefully. A total of 81 rays of golden light shot out from the sword spirit's hands. Then it suddenly descended. It was as if a faint shadow had suddenly formed in this space. Then, it suddenly disintegrated and turned into rays of milky white light. They penetrated this space and entered Chu Luer's brain. Then, one could clearly see that this milky white light was suppressing bits and pieces of pitch-black matter. They separated from Chu Luer's brain and formed a black cloud. The white light suppressed the black cloud and entered her meridians. It gathered the bits and pieces of black matter in her meridians bit by bit and tried its best to suppress them downwards. Its speed became slower and slower. The sword spirit once again made complicated gestures. Then, another ray of white light exploded and entered her meridians. It formed a new force and suppressed the black cloud downwards. This happened 3 times in a row. Only then did all the bits and pieces of black matter were suppressed into a ball and placed into Chu Luer's dantian. The white light enveloped her layer by layer and remained stable. The sword spirit heaved a long sigh and said, "Chuyang, this sister of yours." He suddenly stopped and changed the topic. "After 3 months, you must suppress her again at the same time. Otherwise, once it recoils, the pain will be 10 times more painful than before." Chuyang nodded solemnly. "I will remember this and not delay it." The sword spirit revealed a tired look and said, "That's good. Although I could tell that this little girl's condition was bad, I didn't expect it to be so serious. The original plan was to suppress it once, but it actually happened 3 times. What exactly is this?" Chuyang asked. "It's actually so domineering? This is a congenital illness. Or to put it more deeply, you don't understand. In the human body, other than the meridians, veins, bones, skin, and flesh, there's an even more subtle component. Our heaven's continent hasn't recognized this component yet. But it's these parts that are the most important." The sword spirit said, "It's these parts that really control the joy and pain of the human body. The pain from being beaten, the anger from being scolded, the sadness from being sad, the sense of taste and so on, are all controlled by this part. And Luer is injured in these parts." Chuyang said in shock, "There's such a thing?" The sword spirit smiled. "The human body is a universe of its own. It's all-encompassing. Not to mention this, there are many more subtle and more important things than these that haven't been discovered yet. If all of them are discovered, even if an ordinary person can reach the cultivation level of a second-grade supreme martial artist, or even higher in a day, I wouldn't be surprised. The world is obsessed with finding treasures and reaping without sowing. But they don't know that the greatest treasure in a person's life is his own body. For hundreds of thousands of years, countless people in the heavens continent have lived in this treasure house, but they haven't touched it at all. They've been poor all their lives. It's really sad and lamentable." The sword spirit sighed deeply. Chuyang frowned and pondered. "Luer's illness is congenital. Congenital can make people achieve glory, but can also make people sink into misery. Usually this kind of thing." The sword spirit pointed to the black spot in Chu Luer's dantian and said, "We call it poison of heaven and earth." "Poison of heaven and earth," Chuyang murmured, as if he had thought of something. The sword spirit didn't waste any more time. He transformed out of Chu Luer's body and returned to Chuyang's sea of consciousness. He said, "I need to rest for a while. Once Chu Luer recovers, her talent will be very heaven-defying. Although she started late, she'll definitely become a terrifying figure in the future. Or maybe, she'll be of great help to you." Chuyang smiled faintly. "Sword spirit, you've underestimated me. Luer is my younger sister. If she doesn't have any great ambitions, I'd rather she live a peaceful and happy life. I'd rather she live an ordinary but happy life. But if she has the desire to become a strong person, I'll naturally pave the way for her. But, as for whether she'll be of help to me, I'm not so low as to use my sister." The sword spirit didn't answer. He had already entered a deep state of recuperation. Chu Yang pushed the door open and walked out. Chu Feiling, Yang Rulin and Chu Fian, who had been waiting anxiously for a long time, immediately surrounded him when they saw him coming out. How is it? This was Chu Feiling. Is it done? This was Yang Rulin. Why didn't Luer come out? This was Chu Fian. Only Duan Shuyi was a little timid. She stood where she was, looking at Chu Yang closely. She wanted to hear what Chu Yang had to say, but she was also afraid of what Chu Yang would say. She didn't dare to step forward. Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you. Chu Yang chuckled. His first sentence made everyone happy. Luer shouldn't feel any pain for the next 3 months. That's great. Chu Feiling and the other two clapped their hands excitedly. Duan Shuyi let out a choked moan. Her body swayed, and she almost fell down. Yang Rulin was quick to react. She hurriedly caught her. Luer is asleep. Chu Yang said. Third aunt, go in and take a look. She's fine now. Duan Shuyi nodded emotionally. She wanted to take a step forward, but she felt that her legs were soft and didn't listen to her. Yang Rulin had to support her before she walked in. Although Duan Shuyi's cultivation wasn't considered high in the Chu clan, she was still a disciple of a famous teacher. She also had the cultivation of a martial emperor. Now that she was so weak, it could be seen how intense her heart was. Inside the room, Chu Le was lying quietly on Chu Yang's bed. Her two thin and pitiful arms were crossed on her lower abdomen. Her small head was slightly tilted as she rested her head on the pillow. Her face was glowing with a long-lost blush. Her long eyelashes covered her eyelids like small fans. Her small lips would occasionally move slightly, and the corners of her mouth would curl up. It seemed that even in her sleep, she also felt this relaxed and happy feeling that she had never tasted before. She was smiling happily. Duan Shuyi stared blankly at her daughter, who was sleeping soundly. Her eyes slowly filled with tears. Her daughter was already 11 years old, and this was the first time she had ever seen her daughter's face. Her body slowly softened until she knelt in front of the bed. She was full of gratitude and joy. She gently placed her head on the bed. She looked at her daughter without blinking and covered her mouth with her hands. Chu Yang and the others quietly left. In the living room, the fragrance of tea rose in spirals. Yang Rulin had rebrewed tea for the three of them to soothe their throats. Everyone knew that Chu Luer's crisis had passed temporarily. From now on, it was time to compete. Medicine. This was the key thing. The time was very short. Only 2 years. Chapter 749. Chu Fian frowned. This medicine. Our clan only has one type of absolute vine. This is the only type that my third brother stole from the 100,000 mountains 5 years ago. He almost lost his life because of it. We don't have the other 7 types. Chu Yang raised his eyebrows. Even if we don't have it, other clans don't have it? We don't know if other clans have it or not. Chu Feiling frowned. But even if other clans have it, isn't this medicine also very expensive? And there's no market for it. Besides our Chu clan, there are 2 other big clans in the flat mountain ridge. The other small clans can be ignored. But these 2 clans have always been fighting openly and secretly with our Chu clan. How would they be willing to sell such precious medicine to us? That's right. Right now, the flames of war are everywhere in the heavenly realm. Chaos is everywhere. It seems that a great chaos is about to erupt. At such a time, poisons that harm people are more popular than life-saving medicines. Yang, you've just arrived in the upper 3 heavens, and don't understand the situation. Don't think of everything too simply. Chu Yang said innocently. I didn't think of it that simply. Don't tell me that there aren't any big businesses, auctions or organizations that collect remuneration in this flat mountain ridge. We don't have access to these channels. Plus, we'll collect by ourselves. 2 years is enough. Chu Fian smiled bitterly. 2 years is enough? I really don't know how you came to this conclusion. Even if there are, how can our Chu clan take out so many purple crystals to buy it? Not to mention that second brother is a little stingy in managing the household. Even if second brother isn't stingy, the Chu clan can't afford such wealth. Yang Rulin nodded. These things can't be bought with white or blue crystals. Chu Feiling was thinking about another issue. This place belongs to the Shao clan. The big businesses and auctions are all controlled by the Shao clan. Furthermore, the organizations and individuals that you speak of are all under the control of the Dharma Wielders Organization. The Law Enforcers Organization has blood payers in the entire upper three heavens. As long as there are enough purple crystals, they can post tasks. Then, all the blood payers in the high heavens will see it. Those who are interested will take the task, in exchange for remuneration. Blood payer? Chu Yang asked with interest. What is a blood payer? The predecessor of blood payers was a punishment method set up by the law enforcers. That was to put up a bounty for those who committed heinous crimes in the heavenly layer, and set a time limit to kill them, allowing all the experts in the heavenly layer to hunt them down, and then reward those who succeeded. Because each of these rewards can only be exchanged with a bloody human life, they are called blood payers. But over time, people discovered that not only could this form kill people, but it could also do other things. For example, seeking revenge, finding medicine, killing people, bodyguards, escorting, and so on. As a result, the enforcers of the law especially set up the blood payer group to be in charge of this area. As for the warriors of the Great Bu continent, many of them are unwilling to live under someone else's roof, but they don't have the strength to start their own business, so they become blood payers. They relied on getting paid to live their lives. Over time, more and more people like this appeared, which led to the current situation. Basically, blood payers are free to do whatever they want. They don't want to be under anyone's jurisdiction. If they don't want to do something, they don't do it. However, most of them are still very hardworking. Chu Fian continued. Isn't this nonsense? Chu Failing looked at his younger brother gloomily. If they don't do anything, what do they eat? Drink? What do they use for cultivation? You must know that blood payers' missions start with black crystals, and most of them are made with purple crystals. And one purple crystal is enough to support an emperor-level expert for half a month with double cultivation. How can they not work hard and risk their lives? Chu Fian shrank his neck. I knew that I would be reprimanded if I spoke to you since I was young. They're such a fun group. Minister Chu's eyes suddenly lit up like light bulbs. Fun. Yang Rulin knocked on her son's head. This is a matter of life and death, and you say it's fun. Chu Fian twitched his mouth and thought, big sister-in-law, you don't know, the so-called human lives are just fun in the eyes of this minister. That's all. Although your son is young, the blood on his tender hands is probably 100 times more than the blood on the entire Chu clan. You still think that he's an obedient child. But no matter which channel you use, you need purple crystals. And a lot of purple crystals. Chu Failing said seriously. After all, isn't it just a matter of purple crystals? Chu Yang smiled disapprovingly. It's still very easy for me to earn some purple crystals in a short period of time. Moreover, I have the help of third uncle. Chu Fian's face suddenly wrinkled like a dried bitter gourd. Damn it, can't you not emphasize this matter? My heart trembles every time you emphasize it. Very easy? Chu Failing felt that he needed to correct his son's point of view. How can purple crystals be so easy? Now that a piece of purple crystal has appeared, it can cause many people to fight for it. Do you think that purple crystals are common goods? Don't think that purple crystals are everywhere, just because you have a piece of purple crystal jade essence hanging on your neck. I don't think that purple crystals are common goods. I'm just saying, with my current medical skills, I should be able to make a lot of money by opening a medical center. Chu Yang said calmly. You. Chu Failing snorted. Do you think that you can do whatever you want just because you have good medical skills? Opening a business is about being smooth and slick. Anything unexpected might cause you to be unable to move forward. You'll go bankrupt. Do you think that it's enough just because you have good medical skills? You're far from it. Do you think you can imagine all the scheming of the evil spirits? Big brother, you're too serious. With me there to help Yang, there shouldn't be any problems. Chu Fian smiled bitterly and tried to persuade him. He thought to himself, schemes and schemes? This is what your son is least afraid of. This young master is the master of schemes and schemes. Besides, if Yang goes out to do things by himself, he can also avoid conflict with second brother. Chu Fian said meaningfully. Chu Failing and Yang Rulin suddenly understood, and looked at Chu Yang with a guilty look. Yang Rulin said in a low voice, Yang, good boy, you've been wronged. Chu Yang was stunned. How have I been wronged? I've been planning for so long to start a fight with them. And I'm about to see blood. How did it become a humiliation to my parents? Where did this come from? So be it. Chu Yang thought to himself, and then said painfully, I'm not doing all this for this. After all, the more purple crystals there are, the better. And Sister Lure needs everyone's help. So father, you just have to help me settle the medical center. As for the rest, you don't have to worry about it. This is good. Chu Feiling and Yang Rulin looked at each other, and felt that if Chu Yang stayed in the clan now, he would be easily schemed against by the second brother and his sons. It was better to go out and lie low. The second brother and his sons were not easy to deal with, and their son was honest and pure. They were afraid that he would not be a match for them. If Chu Fian knew what the couple was thinking now, he would definitely pass out. After the matter was settled, Chu Yang felt relaxed and finally asked a question that had been in his heart for a long time. Mother, when you saw me, was there anyone else beside me? No, Yang Rulin said. Oh, Chu Yang frowned. Don't think about going back for another 3 days, Chu Feiling said majestically. All the passageways in the heavens have been closed. Even supreme martial artists can't pass through. Ah, Chu Yang was thinking about this, but he was shocked when he heard this. Why? Yang Rulin sighed and said, It's all because of the birth of that damned Calamity Sword Master, which caused the heavens and earth to be closed. Ah, damned Calamity Sword Master? Chu Yang was stunned. There's such a thing? Hey son, you have to be careful in the future. Try not to provoke others easily. This Calamity Sword Master is not someone to be trifled with. The cruelty and viciousness of this Calamity Sword Master is quite. Yang Rulin combed her son's hair lovingly and sincerely taught him. She gave her son a lesson about the cruel Calamity Sword Master. Chu Yang was speechless and said angrily, This Calamity Sword Master is really a jerk. Yang Rulin said, Yes, Chu Yang. So the four of them changed the topic from the clan, the upper three heavens, the flat mountain ridge, the Chu clan, Chu Lure's illness. Everyone worked together to talk about the terror of the Calamity Sword Master, the cruelty of the Calamity Sword Master, the success of the Calamity Sword Master, the legend of the Calamity Sword Master. Chu Yang laughed dryly and listened to them in a daze, as if he was listening to a book from heaven. Alas, it seems that this kid really has never heard of it. Well, in the lower three heavens, who knows about the terror of the Calamity Sword Master? The three elders sighed in their hearts, and their desire to tutor Chu Yang became even stronger. Amidst the cursing of the Calamity Sword Master, Chu Yang felt extremely conflicted. He felt as if he was sitting on pins and needles, and spent the night as if it were a year. In the end, Minister Chu's saliva unknowingly dripped down to his chin, and he was in a daze. The evil Calamity Sword Master. Early the next morning, Chu Feiling immediately went to make arrangements for the medical center. Of course, it was under the banner of the clan, to seek benefits for the clan. Chu Fian had already gone out to investigate. Since he had decided to do it, he would go all out. Moreover, this was related to the future of his eldest nephew, and the illness of his most beloved niece. Chu Yang drowsily supported his head and leaned on the chair. He thought of the conversation last night. All the medicinal materials are at sky-high prices. Even if you want to buy them, they won't sell them, and so on. He couldn't help but smile, and said to himself disdainfully, When did I say that I want to buy them? If I spend purple crystals for such little things, how troublesome. If I can't buy them, can I steal them? Can't I steal them? Can't I take them by force? Cheating, swindling, stealing, robbing. What kind of methods can't I get them? As long as there are, they won't escape from my hands. Minister Chu gritted his teeth and thought, As for purple crystals, I'm waiting for others to deliver them to me. Do they really think that I'm going to open a medical center to save everyone? Chapter 750. Chu Lure actually slept all the way from night to noon. When she woke up, the little girl stretched lazily. Her eyes were still drowsy, and she was somewhat surprised and confused. She tried to stand up and looked around in a daze. Suddenly she screamed, Ah, why don't I feel any pain today? At the side, Duan Shi's face was covered in tears. She hugged her daughter and said, "It doesn't hurt anymore. It doesn't hurt anymore. It won't hurt anymore. My poor child." Chu Luo looked around in disbelief. There was an indescribable fear on her face. It was as if the sudden cessation of pain was something unacceptable to her. After a long time, she finally woke up. She gently snuggled into her mother's embrace and said in a dreamy voice, "Mother, I don't feel pain anymore. This time it's real." Her voice was very soft, as if she was still afraid that this was a dream. If her voice was too loud, she would wake up from this dream. "It's true, it's true." Duan Shui hugged her daughter tightly as tears streamed down her face. "Your big brother cured you. It's cured." Chu Luo was still in a daze for a while before she finally woke up completely. She asked, "Mother, where's my elder brother?" "Your big brother has something important to do. He has already left." Duan Shui wiped her tears. "Let's go. Mother will take you out to comb your hair and dress up beautifully. When your big brother comes back." "Yes." Luo nodded vigorously. Her chronic illness had been cured by Chu Yang, so she had an inexplicable sense of dependence on Chu Yang. When she woke up and didn't see Chu Yang, she actually felt a sense of loss. It was as if someone she could rely on wasn't by her side. The mother and daughter went out. Yang Ruolan had already prepared a feast for her niece. She wanted to give her niece a good nourishment. Chu Yang and Chu Fian were already on their way to the medical center. If Chu Fei Ling were to personally handle this matter, wouldn't a small pharmacy be a piece of cake? And it was located on the busiest street of Wujin town in the flat mountain ridge. Chu Feilong didn't make things difficult for him. Moreover, he had personally arranged for it to be handled as soon as possible. As per Chu Yang's request, all the medicinal herbs inside were intercepted and kept as fodder. Then a counter, a consultation area, and a chair were added. A row of benches and a few rooms were prepared to accommodate the patients. That was all. But when Chu Yang arrived in front of this medical center, he found out that this small pharmacy that his father had mentioned, it was actually a huge mansion. Outside, there were a total of 7 rooms. Inside, there were 3 entrances and 3 exits. The richly ornamented buildings were surrounded by houses with small bridges and flowing water, flowers and trees. There was even a pavilion and a garden in the courtyard, with purple bamboo swaying in the wind. The moment Chu Yang saw this entire stretch of purple bamboo, he completely fell in love with this place. The purple bamboo was the eternal love of his heart. It was also the only scenery in the world that could shake his heart and soul. Beyond the heaven sect, the purple bamboo fluttered. In his previous life, he had met Imo Qinggu for the first time. It was a purple bamboo forest. He had pledged his love to Imo Qinggu in the purple bamboo forest. In his previous life, his final farewell to Imo Qinggu was still a field of purple bamboo. Chu Yang smiled faintly and walked into the purple bamboos in the courtyard. He stroked them one by one. His eyes were distant and full of disappointment. Who would have thought that the place where I, Chu Yang, started out in the upper 3 heavens would have such a stretch of purple bamboo? Chu Fian looked at Chu Yang wandering in the purple bamboo forest. His eyes revealed a strange look, but he didn't go forward to disturb him. He knew that Chu Yang seemed to have recalled something. No one would want to be disturbed at such a time. After a long time, when Chu Yang came out of the purple bamboo forest, Chu Fian seemed to feel that something had changed in Chu Yang, but he couldn't put his finger on it. It was as if he had put down something, but also as if he had picked up something. "How many people do you need?" Chu Fian asked. "The 2 of us are enough." Chu Yang smiled. "The 2 of us?" Chu Fian was surprised. "Such a big foundation. And there are only 2 of us? Can we handle it?" "Don't worry." Chu Yang smiled mysteriously. "The 2 of us are enough." He smiled gently and said, "My father and mother can't come here. After all, they are the eldest in the Chu clan. Other than them, I don't have anyone else that I can trust." He looked at Chu Fian and said, "Fourth uncle, there's only the 2 of us left to build a great foundation." Chu Fian touched his nose and smiled bitterly. "Minister Chu, as long as you don't break up my old bones and sell them, I'll go crazy with your eldest nephew." Chu Yang tilted his head and looked at him, saying, "Fourth uncle, you'll definitely become a legend in the Chongtian continent." "Of course." Chu Fian smiled even more bitterly. A legend whose tail is pinched by his own nephew. I guess I'm the only one since ancient times. Chu Yang laughed loudly. Fourth uncle, I don't understand. Why didn't you force yourself on me and bring me back to verify my identity? Wouldn't everything be fine if you did that? Chu Yang asked puzzledly. Chu Fian's face suddenly turned yellow. He stretched out 2 hands, 3 fingers on his left hand and 5 fingers on his right hand, saying, My dear eldest nephew, do you think I didn't want to do that? To tell you the truth, I've already brought back 35 people before you. Chu Yang was stunned. 35? Do you know what that means? Chu Fian couldn't help but twitch a little. He asked with a bitter smile. What does that mean? Chu Yang asked curiously. It means 71 rounds of beatings. Chu Fian wanted to cry but had no tears. Every time I brought back the wrong person, your grandpa would beat me up. Your father would comfort me every time. Then he would get angry at your mother and beat me up the next day. 2 rounds of beatings every time. There's no exception, Chu Fian said speechlessly. That's still 70 rounds of beatings, not 71. Chu Yang was very good at math. But the last time, Elder happened to come out from his closed-door training. Chu Fian couldn't bear to look back. That beating was really terrible. Your luck is really incurable. Fourth uncle. Chu Yang looked at his fourth uncle sympathetically. And the last time, the elder gave me an ultimatum. If I can't find the real one and bring back a fake one, the elder will turn me into a fake one too. Chu Fian said tearfully as he sighed. Chu Yang said sincerely. Ancestor, you're really my idol. He's also my idol, Chu Fian said sorrowfully. Chu Fian's mood was very bad after Chu Yang mentioned his sad memories. On the same day, he yelled and called for workers. Then he personally oversaw the work. He held the whip in his hand like a fiend and cracked it loudly. He completed Chu Yang's request within 2 hours. It was only afternoon before the sky turned dark, but everything was done. Minister Chu grabbed a plaque. With his own hands, he wrote 5 large words in a flamboyant style. Purple crystals Huichun Hall. Then Chu Fian melted gold and iron into a magnificent plaque according to Chu Yang's request. He hung it on the door. The couplets were naturally made by Chu Yang. Chu Fian was the second shopkeeper, the workers, the nurses and the waiters. He took care of everything. The first part of the couplet was, Give me purple crystals, and I'll bring you back to life. The second part of the couplet was, Without purple crystals, I'll leave you to die. She looked exactly like a greedy person. In particular, Minister Chu had ingeniously made the door of the purple crystals Huichun Hall into an oval shape. From afar, the plaque and the couplets on the left and right were like ancient beasts opening their bloody mouths. Very vividly he said, Brothers, as long as you dare to walk in, I'll dare to kill you. It vividly expressed Minister Chu's thirst for purple crystals. The walls on both sides were originally white. Chu Yang ordered people to paint them white again to advertise. On the left was, Specializes in treating difficult and complicated diseases. We don't take care of minor illnesses and disasters. It's normal to come back from the dead. There are internal and external injuries. Will be cured. On the right was, Specializes in treating impotence and premature ejaculation. Then he drew the shape of a burly man. His back was straight, his face was full of beard, and his eyes were full of lust. He stepped out and crushed a big rock under his feet. On this burly man's straight waist, there were a few large words written in bold. Men, it's better to be a little bit taller. Beside the foot of this burly man, there were a few big words in the same color. Men are better the harder they are. On the burly man, there was a few words. I despise weaklings. On one side, there was only a thick tree stump. Only 1/3 of the big picture was shown. Not a single word was written. Yu Yunjiu. But Minister Chu clearly felt that it wasn't enough. He actually wrote a few words on the wall of the restaurant. Come, I'll let you do it however you want. Below, there was a small line of words. Specializes in treating infertility. Chu Yang's abacus was very loud. Nowadays, there were a lot of people who did not have children. Martial artists were particular about refining energy into energy. It wasn't easy to give birth until they reached a certain level. And everyone hoped that they could nurture their descendants through dual cultivation. In that way, they could lay a good foundation for their children when they reached the Xiantian level. So most of the experts in the heavenly layer world only had descendants when they were old. This was also a major reason that restricted the development of the clan and the reproduction of their descendants. But Minister Chu had 2 lust dragons in his hands and was very confident about this. He definitely dared to say this. Can't give birth in 30 years? Can't give birth in 50 years? Can't give birth in 200 years? No problem. As long as you come to me, I'll let you give birth. Chu Fian looked at his eldest nephew, who was writing on the snow-white wall. The words he wrote were like dragons flying and phoenixes flying. It was really beautiful. He was praising in his heart. This eldest nephew is really good at martial arts. He's a genius in all aspects. And he can treat illnesses. He's definitely a first-class talent. Then he saw a series of advertisements written by Minister Chu. Suddenly, Chu Fian's balls almost cramped. What's this? It's simply laughable and not presentable. Just as he was about to step forward to stop him, Minister Chu said slowly, "Fourth uncle, when you found me, why didn't you tell the family? I just can't understand this." Chu Fian's lips turned green and his face turned white. He covered his head and ran away like a rat. That night, Minister Chu was busy in the Purple Crystal's Huichun Hall. The next morning, as countless fireworks and firecrackers exploded crazily, a piece of news shook the flat mountain ridge of the upper 3 heavens. The medical hall of the peerless divine doctor, Purple Crystal's Huichun Hall, had opened. Third update, requesting monthly votes. He couldn't let his brothers say that Feng Ling wouldn't update if everyone voted for him. So he worked very hard to speed up the plot and publish this update. Tomorrow is July 1st. Chapter 751. Part 7 Chapter 20. Business is difficult. We need to tackle many problems at the same time. Big Boss Chu was wearing a red groom's robe. He was smiling as he welcomed the guests at the entrance of the shop. His eyes were shining with the brilliance of purple crystals. He looked like a rich man. What a sensation! This street was originally the most prosperous one. There were all kinds of people here. Opposite were 2 famous restaurants in the flat mountain ridge. A few hundred feet away was the Bloodpayers Hall of the law enforcement officers. The Xiao clan's auction and the headquarters of the big chambers of commerce were all on this street. There were many tall buildings. With the sound of the fireworks, everyone rushed over to see what was going on. Even the people from the big clans rushed over. The shopkeepers of the various shops rushed over personally, because everyone knew that this shop belonged to the Chu clan. It seemed that the Chu clan was going to make a new move. But when everyone got here and saw what was going on, they were all dumbfounded and tongue-tied. Some stared with their eyes wide open. Some shook their heads and sighed in disappointment. Some looked around in disbelief. And there were even some who burst into laughter. Was this really the Chu clan's shop? Why did such a ridiculous thing suddenly appear? This was even more disgusting than the banners of the martial world. Even the pimps who shouted golden spear, never fall in the brothels, seemed to be better than this. It was even weirder when they looked again. Other than the Chu clan's 4th master, Chu Fian, no one else was here. So everyone muttered, was this really the Chu clan's shop? Or, what is the Chu clan up to again? Who is that young man? Chu Feiling's wife, who originally wanted to come and watch the ceremony, went back with a red face after seeing Chu Yang's advertisement. As she walked, she gritted her teeth. Chu Yang, this little bastard. When he comes back, I must teach him a lesson. How embarrassing. The Chu clan's 4th master had nowhere to run. He stood at the entrance of the shop in his red robe. His face turned into a monkey's, but after the fireworks and firecrackers were set off like a one-man show, the other bosses still entered the shop in a daze. Then they congratulated each other, put down their gift bags, and congratulated each other at the speed of a machine gun. Then, they left as if they were running for their lives. It wasn't easy to stay in this shop. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. If we stay here for one more minute, the news of I can't make it will spread. How are we going to live then? Chu Yang looked at the table full of red packets and smiled. Seems like this is the fastest way to make money. Should I close the shop today and reopen it tomorrow? He turned his head and saw that Chu Fian was already lying on the chair, gasping for air, on the brink of death. What's wrong with you? Chu Yang was surprised. I've never been so embarrassed in my life before. Chu Fian cried and said, You're fucking acting like you're selling aphrodisiac. What do you mean by putting on a posture of selling aphrodisiac? Chu Yang said discontentedly, I am selling aphrodisiac. Fourth Master Chu's neck tilted, and he fainted. Before Shu Michuan too fainted, she felt that her reputation had gone down the drain. No wonder this novel said that if I follow him, I will definitely be able to reach the heavens. He was probably already famous in history. Chu Fian, the fourth son of the Chu clan who specialized in aphrodisiacs. Chu Fian cried but had no tears. Big Boss Chu's debao had been open for a whole day, but it was completely empty. Chu Yang winked at Chu Fian. Fourth uncle, we'll start the operation tonight. What operation? Chu Fian asked puzzledly. We'll find a few places and set a few fires. There shouldn't be any problem, right? Chu Yang smiled kindly and winked mischievously. Chu Fian was confused. Set a fire? Our business is very difficult. We need to do many things at the same time. Chu Yang said worriedly. Chu Fian thought so too. However, Chu Fian soon realized what his eldest nephew meant by multi-pronged. That night, a warehouse of a big business in Wuxia town of the flat mountain ridge suddenly emitted a red light. Then, flames started to rise from all directions. In the entire Wuxia town of the flat mountain ridge, no less than 30 people were on fire from all directions. 7 asterisk. Immediately, the people shouted and the horses neighed. The sounds of gongs and drums resounded through the sky, and the long howls echoed for a long time. It was the experts from each side gathering their men. Curses that almost drowned out the entire heaven, and earth rose and fell in an uproar just like that. Damn it, everyone was sleeping well. Which immoral person set a fire? Isn't this a bastard? After Chu Fian finished setting the fire, he sneaked back to the Purple Crystals Hall. When he entered the hall, he realized that the big boss was not inside. He couldn't help but wonder, where did Chu Yang go? His cultivation hasn't recovered yet. Where could he have gone? He recalled Chu Yang's words before he left. After setting the fire, don't go anywhere. Just come back and look after the house. He seemed to have expected this long ago. Fourth Master Chu was confused. What's this little bastard up to? Where did Big Boss Chu go? The current Big Boss Chu had already changed his body shape. He had become short and fat. He was dressed in black. In the night he was like a rubber ball. With the sword spirit possessing his body, his speed was really as fast as light. The first thing he did was to go to a shop of the Chu clan. Minister Chu had already asked around. The person in charge of this shop was Chu Feilong's confidant. Since the entire Wuxia town was going to suffer, there was no reason why the Chu clan would not suffer, right? Therefore, Chu Feilong's shop became Chu Yang's primary target. Minister Chu used an earth-shattering momentum to rush in. He shook his hands and knocked over 2 guards. After slapping them a dozen times, he asked for the location of the warehouse. He dashed over like a gust of wind and kicked out. 2 huge bronze doors flew out like a pair of wings. Then, Minister Chu casually walked into the warehouse. The guards inside were still in a state of shock. Just as they rushed forward, Chu Yang simply swept the floor, and the 8 burly men were sent flying into the air. Chu Yang waved his firecracker. Immediately, a gust of thick smoke came out. With a whoosh he rose from the thick smoke. From afar, he could see 4 figures rushing over. Chu Yang snorted, but didn't say anything. He swooped down from midair, and swept past the 4 men like a whirlwind. Bang! 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 The 4 king-level experts swayed a few times as if they were suffering from hysteria. Then they screamed like pigs being slaughtered. They fell to the ground and rolled around. Chu Yang had already brutally entered the inner shop. That confidant of Chu Feilong was carrying a small box, and trying to squeeze out of the window. He had just stuck his head out. Chu Yang sneered. He quickly stepped forward, grabbed the thick buttocks and pulled them back. Ah! A strange scream was heard. This king-level expert was already screaming with all his might. Chu Yang had grabbed and flung his butt, and he had lost a whole pound of flesh. Then Chu Yang poked him a few times. He grabbed the small box with one hand, and flew out like a gust of wind. The people in the shop shouted and chased after him. However, they saw a gentle breeze and a bright moon in the sky. People were shouting and horses were neighing from all directions. It was as if the end of the world had arrived. However, the masked man in black who had just stolen the small box had already disappeared. Only the shopkeeper and the 4 martial deacons were wailing and rolling on the ground. It was as if they had received the cruelest punishment in the world. Chu Yang's move was an extremely evil martial art that he had retrieved from the first tribulation sword master's memory. Yang dispersing soul hand. This was an extremely evil martial art. The victim's entire body would spasm, and his joints would be dislocated. This was only the first stage. If the victim could not be cured within a day, the punishment would be even worse. For example, this evil martial art could loosen a person's lumbar vertebrae and pelvis. Then, one of them would be smashed forward, and the other would be smashed backward. One could only imagine how it would feel like. However, this was not the only thing. At the same time, the person's shoulders, arms, and other important joints would be dislocated and smashed into each other. This was originally a martial art that was specially used for interrogation. After the first tribulation sword master learned it, it became an evil martial art. Now the sword spirit was controlling Chu Yang's body and using this martial art. He even added his own understanding of the changes. No one would be able to recognize this martial art from 10,000 years ago. Even if the first tribulation sword master came here personally, he would not be able to recognize it. Moreover, in the current heaven-level continent, other than the sword spirit and Chu Yang, no one else could understand this martial art. Minister Chu disappeared as soon as he came out of the hall. The small box was directly stored in the tribulation space. When he opened it, Chu Yang was greatly disappointed. There were only a dozen red crystals, 100 blue crystals, 2 black crystals, and not a single purple crystal. Fuck, Big Boss Chu scolded angrily. You spent so much effort just for such a small thing? So unlucky. He did not think that the assets of the shops of the big clans here were basically returned to the clan once every 3 days. The wealth that he had now was already equivalent to 3 days' worth of the shop's income. Besides, this was already an amazing amount of wealth. And this was just one shop. Chu Yang's black figure was illuminated by the fire in the night. He had already pounced on other places that were on fire like a demon. He destroyed everything in his way. The sword spirit did not even use much strength, but the experts who were guarding the warehouse were already in a mess. Chu Yang reckoned that he had already killed more than 30 third-grade martial kings and a dozen third-grade martial emperors. Basically, every clan had a few. Chu Yang became more and more excited. He was extremely daring. He even looted the 3 biggest shops of the Shao clan. Bang! 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 A first-grade monarch-level expert, an emperor-level expert, and 18 first-grade king-level experts of the Shao clan met with calamity at the same time. Big Boss Chu ransacked more than 30 shops. What made him depressed was that he did not even find a single purple crystal. He only collected less than 100 black crystals, but the blue crystals and red crystals were piled up like a mountain. Big Boss Chu checked with red eyes. Every time he checked, he scolded. He only felt depressed. After putting in so much effort, he only received such a small amount of things. This was simply an insult to Minister Chu's intelligence. Big Boss Chu was very dissatisfied. He made up his mind and went straight to the auction hall of the law enforcement officers while cursing. Fuck. Since I've already done it once, I'll make it the biggest one. Anyway, who the fuck knows that I did it? Chapter 752. Law Enforcement Auction Hall. The name of the Law Enforcement Auction Hall was easy to understand. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. At present, there were already a few people in embroidered robes, standing at the highest point of the 5-story building, looking into the distance. Wujin Town is in trouble. The person in front had 3 strands of long beard. He had a square face and a pair of deep eyes. He asked, "Which shop do you think started the fire this time?" "It might not be these 3. The other person was a bit bloated. He had an oval face and seemed to be smiling all the time. He said, "If we were to talk about the start of the fire, although the speed was fast, there was still a pattern to it. It started from the east, went in a big circle, and then ended in the northeast. According to the report, the fire this time was just a surprise attack. The cultivation of the person who started the fire might not be very high. At most, he should be a level 5 martial emperor. Even a martial king could do it. This should be the conclusion of the round-faced man. What about after that? The long-bearded man asked with a smile. He was obviously very satisfied with his subordinate's deduction. After that, it's different. However, it's obvious that this was done by one person. So far, there are 10 shops that have reported to us. Just as he said this, someone shouted from inside. 2 more shops have been robbed. They belong to the Chu clan and the Bao clan. It's 21 shops, and it's still getting worse. The round-faced man immediately changed his tone and said, "This person's cultivation is really terrifying. Even compared to you, boss. I'm afraid." He didn't finish his sentence, but everyone understood what he meant. The few people in silver behind him all changed their expressions. His elder brother was a martial monarch, and was the person in charge of the entire flat mountain ridge. This culprit's cultivation was actually higher than his elder brother's? The long-bearded man was silent for a moment before he said, "You're right. This person's speed, ruthlessness, and cultivation are things that I'm no match for. However, we don't have to worry. This is the Shao clan's territory. Although that person isn't afraid of the Shao clan. In the entire continent, I have never heard of anyone who dares to touch us enforcers." The round-faced man smiled proudly. 7 *, not necessarily. The long-bearded man said solemnly. Have all the items up for auction been properly packed? All the precious treasures seem to have been sent into the secret chamber? They've all entered the secret chamber. The round-faced man chuckled and said, "Boss has always been meticulous and thoughtful, but this little brother thinks that, this time, I'm afraid that boss is overthinking things. I hope I'm just overthinking." The bearded man's face was filled with worry. A report came from inside. This time, the voice was filled with shock. News came from the Shao clan's 3 big shops. All of them have been robbed. Everyone's face changed. This person even dared to rob the Shao clan. Be on guard, the long-bearded man ordered. Everyone gather immediately. Before he finished speaking, a long howl could be heard. The long-bearded man was shocked and shouted loudly. Immediately, in the blink of an eye, under the fire and thick smoke in the starry sky, a figure had already appeared. The first time this figure appeared, it was only the size of a sparrow. But the second time, it was as big as a human head. The third time, it was standing calmly in front of the auction hall. It was dressed in black, and had a black scarf covering its face. It was looking up at Dong Xuebing. Its eyes were shining like 2 bolts of lightning. It was actually a short and fat man. The other experts from the law enforcement hall, including the 4 from before, were all standing behind the long-bearded man. Everyone's face was solemn as they looked at the short and fat man. They could feel a terrifying aura coming from him. It was a sharp, murderous aura. Haha, everyone is lined up so neatly. The short and fat man laughed. His voice was bleak and desolate, making everyone who heard it feel uncomfortable. He said, "Come down. This old man is not used to raising his head to talk to people. If you don't want this building to collapse, come down." Arrogant. One of the law enforcement hall's experts changed. 7 * 7 *, go down. The long-bearded man shouted and said loudly, "You have come from afar. Please forgive me for not going out to welcome you." As he said that, he leaped up and landed lightly. He knew that the other party was not boasting. With the other party's cultivation, it was not difficult for him to flatten this building in an instant. Seeing that their boss had gone down, the others could only follow suit. Looking from the ground, the short and fat man looked even shorter. He laughed coldly and said, "A wise man submits to circumstances. The law enforcement hall is indeed all wise." These words were like a resounding slap to the face. He was clearly saying that the law enforcement hall was cowardly. Instantly, several people could not hold back and wanted to jump out to teach this arrogant man a lesson. But they were stopped by the long-bearded man. "May I know who you are?" The long-bearded man stepped forward and asked with a smile. He was elegant and did not get angry at all. "Don't you see that I have a long face?" The short and fat man was not moved by force or persuasion. He shouted, "You're asking for my name? If I can say my name, why would I have a long face? Is your brain made of tofu? Then I won't ask." The long-bearded man smiled calmly and said, "May I know why you're here? Please tell me. As long as I can do it, I really hope to be friends with you. I don't have anything else. I'm just lacking something, so I'm here to see if you have it." Seeing that the other party was so polite, the short and fat man also became elegant. "May I know what you're lacking?" The long-bearded man said gently, "I'm Qin Baoshan. I'm the person in charge of the law enforcement hall in the Flat Mountain Ridge. I believe that I can help you. Please tell me." "That's good. I've been to a few clans, and this is the only sensible one I've seen." The short and fat man laughed. "Actually, it's nothing much. I've taken in 2 disciples. Their cultivation progress is too slow, and I've run out of purple crystals. I'm here to look for some purple crystals. I don't need a lot, just 800 or 1,000 will do. In addition, I'm lacking some heavenly treasures. I'm not asking for much. Whether it's poison or nourishment, 100 of each type should be enough." The long-bearded man, Qin Baoshan's face darkened. "Your requirements are really not high. 800 or 1,000 purple crystals. Heavenly treasures for poison or nourishment, 100 of each type. The entire auction hall doesn't even have so many purple crystals. You're simply asking for our lives. Brother, your requirements are a little too much." Qin Baoshan took a deep breath and said, "I can't take out so many purple crystals now. But if you're in urgent need of them, can I have a discussion with you?" "What discussion?" The short and fat man blinked. "I can make the decision to give you 30 purple crystals. This is the maximum amount that I can use," Qin Baoshan said sincerely. "I hope that you can think for us and give us a way out." The 13 people behind him were extremely surprised. When did our boss become so soft? He's actually asking for anything? "Everyone, let's attack together and chop this damn short and fat man into pieces." How would they know that Qin Baoshan had already judged from the other party's body movements and tone that this person was at least a martial monarch? If they really fought, none of them would be able to survive. At that time, they would really lose everything. Therefore, he spoke nicely, hoping that this fiend would leave, and that would be the end of the matter. Qin Baoshan was also not a kind person. He was also a law enforcement officer, and had always been tyrannical. But his tyrannical behavior depended on who he was dealing with. That was why he could live for so long. This short and fat man in front of him obviously did not respect him as a law enforcement officer. 30 purple crystals? Do you think I'm always a beggar? The short and fat man was furious. "Qin Baoshan, I thought that you're still a sensible person. I didn't expect to be insulted like this. Don't talk nonsense, let's fight." Qin Baoshan shouted. "Brother, wait. How many do you want? Why don't we negotiate?" Of course, this brother also knows that 1,000 or 800 purple crystals is definitely not something that can be found in such a remote place. If you don't have the intention to go against the law enforcement officers, please be sincere and lay down the path. When doing business, one must always be honest. Honesty, the short and fat man laughed. "All right, I won't make things difficult for you. Qin Baoshan, you've compromised today. How about this? I don't want anything from you. You only need to take out 300 purple crystals. I'll turn around and leave today." 300 purple crystals. The wrinkles on Qin Baoshan's face seemed to have deepened. He could take out 300 purple crystals. But they didn't belong to him. They belonged to the organization. If he took them out for no reason, he would be severely punished even if he kept his life. "Qin Baoshan, what are you hesitating for? You should know that my conditions are already very generous." The short and fat man's eyes flashed fiercely. Of course, Qin Baoshan knew this. The other party had changed from being overbearing to his current attitude. For a raider, this was already very lenient. And from this point, it also showed that the other party didn't intend to fight to the death with the law enforcement officers. "All right," Qin Baoshan's eyes flashed and he said, "I'll verify with you. If you win, I'll give you 300 purple crystals. If Your Excellency loses, Your Excellency should also know that 300 purple crystals are extremely difficult to obtain." As soon as Qin Baoshan said this, everyone was not stupid. They immediately understood what he meant. If Qin Baoshan was defeated, the organization would have nothing to say if he gave out the purple crystals. Moreover, the 13 brothers' lives would be preserved. If Qin Baoshan was defeated, wouldn't they only be sending themselves to their deaths if they went up? The short and fat man laughed. Qin Baoshan, you're a smart man. Let's fight. With a laugh, Qin Baoshan jumped out. A figure flashed in front of Qin Baoshan. The short and fat figure floated up like a black cloud and circled around Qin Baoshan. After 3 rounds, the figure had turned into a big cloud of black fog. Qin Baoshan unsheathed his sword with a clang. He looked down and held his sword motionless. If the enemy doesn't move, I won't move. There are indeed experts among the law enforcement officers. The short and fat man praised. Suddenly, with a whoosh, the cloud of black fog quickly gathered to one side. It was like a whale sucking in water. It disappeared instantly. It actually sucked the surroundings into a vacuum. Second update. It's too late. I'll continue to work hard. After I woke up this afternoon, I felt that my neck was a little stiff. I thought it was nothing, but I felt even more uncomfortable after I finished writing a chapter. So I went for a massage, which delayed my time. But don't worry. I said 4 updates yesterday, so it's 4 updates. This is a fact. Even Elder Huang can't change it. I'll continue to write, even if it's late. Chapter 753. The short and fat man shouted, and immediately rushed forward. Qin Baoshan's sword was like autumn water. It suddenly transformed into a sword mountain and covered Qin Baoshan's head. Qin Baoshan did not put on any pretense at all. His first move was to kill Qin Baoshan with great momentum. With a few clangs, the short and fat man laughed like thunder. He actually dashed madly in the sword light. When Qin Baoshan's sword slashed down, he would use his hand to block it. When his palm and the sword collided, the sound of metal clashing could be heard. After hundreds of collisions, Qin Baoshan had already retreated a dozen steps. The short and fat man laughed and said, I'm not going to play with you anymore. Go and prepare the purple crystals. His palm struck towards Qin Baoshan. Qin Baoshan tried his best to dodge. His sword was like rain and waterfall, but the opponent's palm floated in like a ghost. Clang! It was a solid palm strike. Boom! Qin Baoshan spat out blood and retreated quickly. The other party rushed up like a shadow. Qin Baoshan only felt the other party's 2 fingers gently caressing his throat. When he was about to die, the other party had already placed a finger on his shoulder. The other party laughed and said, Leave some memories for me. Qin Baoshan staggered out. His body spun and fell heavily to the ground. He rolled a few times on the ground before he got up with his face covered in dirt. He only felt a sharp pain in his chest. One of his shoulders had already lost feeling. You're really good at martial arts. Qin Baoshan clenched his teeth and said while touching his shoulder. You're not convinced? The short and fat man squinted at him. Humph! Qin Baoshan snorted and said, Go and get 300 purple crystals. The round-faced man knew that he could not do this. And Qin Baoshan had already paid the price. If he did not know what was good for him now, there would be corpses everywhere. He nodded and rushed in. Not long after, he came out holding a white crystal box. His face was twisted, and he was very reluctant to part with it. The short and fat man laughed and waved his hand. The white crystal box flew into his hand automatically. He laughed. The mountains are high and the rivers are long. I'm sure we'll meet again. He rose up and flashed in the night sky, disappearing without a trace. Looking at the direction, he had gone to the north. A few hundred miles to the north was a forest. After this forest, it would no longer be the territory of the flat mountain ridge. It would become the sinking sand valley. All the law enforcers were dumbfounded. Qin Baoshan groaned. Only then did everyone regain their senses. Big brother, are you all right? Qin Baoshan snorted and said, It's not a big deal. He had shown mercy when he slapped me, and I vomited a mouthful of blood, and I am fine. However, his last finger sealed my left shoulder, left arm, and left hand. Ah! Everyone exclaimed in unison. This person is a martial saint expert. Qin Baoshan raised the sword in his right hand. When everyone saw this, they were all shocked. The blade of the sword was full of gaps. At first glance, it was actually very uniform, giving people the misconception that this was not a sword, but a piece of paper. And it was a double-sided saw. This was a rare good sword, and it was wielded by Qin Baoshan, who was a martial monarch. But Qin Baoshan only used his palms to break the sword into hundreds of pieces. The 13 people sucked in cold breaths at the same time. If we had attacked him together, the ones lying on the ground now would be the 14 of us. Qin Baoshan's eyes were cold as he looked around. Everyone trembled. It's all thanks to Big Brother. Big Brother, you've suffered. Report this matter to the branch immediately. Qin Baoshan nodded. And this person obviously doesn't want to fall out with us, so he showed mercy. But no matter whether he showed mercy or not, he had already offended the dignity of the law enforcement officers. Big Brother, are you saying that this person is actually? Everyone asked. Yes, this person is very wary of the law enforcement officers. But since he's so wary, he still came to snatch the purple crystals. This means that he really needs the purple crystals. Qin Baoshan said, short and fat, a martial saint, and lacking the purple crystals. With these 3 clues, this person's identity is no longer a secret. Report this matter quickly. After Qin Baoshan finished his last sentence, he stroked his shoulder and walked inside. Because at this moment, he suddenly felt that his shoulder was hurting more and more, and it was becoming more and more unbearable. Short and fat disappeared like a shooting star. Then, Minister Chu returned to his purple crystals Huichun Hall. 4th Elder Chu had been waiting for a long time. When he saw Chu Yang return, he said angrily, "Where did you go? Why are you so late?" Chu Yang smiled. "4th uncle, don't be impatient. I just saw that it was very lively outside, so I went out for a stroll." Chu Fian almost fell ill from anger. Went out for a stroll? Why did you go out for a stroll at such a time? Suddenly he thought of something. Have you recovered your martial power? Yang Fian's face turned bitter. In these few days, he could finally use some of his elemental qi, but he was still far from recovering. Moreover, even if he recovered, he would probably not admit it. Why did you go for a stroll if you haven't recovered? Chu Fian was so scared that he broke out in cold sweat. He flew into a rage. Do you know that your words have scared away more than half of my 3 spirits and 7 souls? 4th uncle, we have an agreement. Here, I have the final say. You're my assistant. I make all the decisions. Chu Yang said slowly. In other words, you're a worker in my clinic. Have you ever seen a worker talk to an old man like this? I'll ask you to be a worker. It would have been better if he didn't mention this. Once he did, Chu Fian flew into a rage out of humiliation. He pounced on Chu Yang and beat him up violently. Of course, I have some scruples when there are others around you. Now that there's only the 2 of us here, you actually dare to threaten me? If I don't take this chance to vent my anger, when will I? Chu Yang had brought this upon himself. He didn't have any cultivation now, and his parents weren't by his side. So, he had to suffer this grievance in silence. Chu Yang screamed in pain. However, Chu Fian still didn't ask what Chu Yang had done this time. After a while, Chu Fian stopped with satisfaction. Seeing that Big Boss Chu's buttocks had become as big as 4 people, he couldn't help but feel comfortable. He thought, damn it, when there's only the 2 of us, I can do whatever I want with this little guy. That was a great idea. Big Boss Chu got up angrily and went to his room to sleep with a black face. In the middle of the night, only 4th Master Chu's owl-like laughter could be heard. The entire flat mountain ridge was in a complete mess. Countless armored cavalry came and went. At this moment, it was the Chu clan's cavalry, the Bao clan's cavalry, and then the Liao clan's cavalry. The 3 big clans were running back and forth, looking for any suspicious clues. Not long after, the Xiao clan also arrived. They almost turned the entire flat mountain ridge upside down. The law enforcement hall also issued a new bounty for blood payers. Bounty for a short and fat man. The bounty was hung high under the words blood payers. Big Boss Chu didn't have any business at all, so he went to see what was going on. He saw that the bounty was really well drawn. It seemed that among the 14 people last night, there was actually a painting expert. Minister Chu thought, if there's a chance, I'd like to ask this guy to draw a few erotic paintings. This isn't for fun, but a necessity for my purple crystal Huichun Hall. Erotic paintings are also tools for selling aphrodisiacs. Since early morning, all the medical halls in Wujin town were instantly overcrowded. And those who came were all tyrannical people. He cleared out the crowd of irrelevant people and treated the patients. These injured people were all brought back to their clans last night. But their clans obviously couldn't do anything about their injuries. So they were brought out to seek medical treatment. None of the big clans dared to invite the doctors back directly. Everyone has injured people. Why should you invite them back? What are your intentions? You'll get into big trouble if you do that. Only Big Boss Chu's purple crystals Huichun Hall was still deserted. Not a single patient came. Fourth Master Chu was indignant. Fuck, there are so many patients and so many injured people, but none of them came to us. This is really infuriating. Chu Fian couldn't figure out what happened last night. Of course, he suspected his nephew, but Chu Yang's performance was very innocent. He just came here, and his martial arts hadn't recovered. Besides, even if he recovered, Chu Yang couldn't have done it. So, Fourth Master Chu was confused and almost fell ill. Big Boss Chu lay on the recliner and squinted his eyes. Fourth uncle, don't be impatient. I knew that they would come sooner or later. Chu Fian couldn't be bothered with him. He still went out to take a look every once in a while, but still, no one came. Seeing that it was already noon, Big Boss Chu's place still hadn't opened yet. It was still Big Boss. He couldn't help but scratch his head and anxiously said, "Damn it, there are also injured people in our clan. Why don't they come to take care of their own business?" Chu Yang rolled his eyes and lay on his side, leaving the back of his head to Fourth Master Chu. He cursed in his heart, "You're a jerk. You're collecting money from your own people? Isn't that voluntary labor? And it's to help Chu Feilong. I don't have the time to do so." Until afternoon no one came. But things progressed very quickly. How could these doctors from the flat mountain ridge cure Chu Yang's poison? Since they couldn't cure Chu Yang's poison, these martial emperors and kings were in so much pain that they almost gnawed on their own flesh. How could they spare these quacks? His entourage would smash these medical centers until they were completely wiped out. Only a few medical centers with strong backing were spared. The rest were basically bankrupt. Seeing that the sky was getting dark, Big Boss Chu and his assistant Chu Fian moved out a small table. There were a few dishes and a pot of wine. The two of them took a sip and were very satisfied. The sound of horse hooves suddenly sounded. A group of people and horses pulled a carriage. Along the way, screams could be heard from the carriage. It seemed that there was no hope of curing Chu Yang's injuries. Chu Fian's eyes were very sharp. He said, "It's the people from the Bao clan. It seems that they're unlucky. The one leading the horse is Bao Ping'an, the chief steward of the Bao clan. Look at him. It's as if his mother has died. How satisfying." While Fourth Master Chu was gloating, he saw Bao Ping'an turn his head and look over. Then he rode his horse forward, cupped his hands and said with a fake smile, "Oh, isn't this Fourth Master Chu?" Chapter 754. Chu Fian sat still and said, "Bao Ping'an, did someone die in your family? Look at your ugly face. It's as if you're crying for your mother." Bao Ping'an's face changed and he smiled bitterly. "Fourth Master, you must be joking. It's all because of what happened last night. Sai, is your Chu clan safe and sound?" Chu Fian rolled his eyes. "Whether or not my Chu clan is in trouble is none of your business. Bao Ping'an was only a chief steward in the Bao clan. How would he dare to go against the fourth master of the Chu clan?" Laughing bitterly, he rolled his eyes and said, "Fourth Master, is this your family's new restaurant?" Chu Fian smiled. "Do you think I wouldn't come if this clinic belonged to your Bao clan?" Bao Ping'an smiled. "This is great. A new clinic opened by the Chu clan. And with the fourth master of the Chu clan in charge, you must be a divine doctor. Men, bring the patient in." He turned his head and smiled. "Fourth Master, since you're doing business, you can't possibly not let the patient in, right?" Chu Fian smiled. "Since you're doing business, why would you not let those who depend on you outside? But my clinic is different from others. Bao Ping'an, you have to magnify your eyes and take a look. Once you understand, you can come in. Don't say that I'm blackmailing you." "Different from others? How is it different?" Bao Pingon looked carefully. He looked at the couplets and the advertisements. Suddenly he laughed. Fourth Master, is this really your Chu clan's clinic? Chu Fian rolled his eyes. Come in if you want to see a doctor. If you don't, get out. If you laugh again, I'll make sure you don't laugh for the rest of your life. Bao Pingon hurriedly stopped laughing and said, This is the Amethyst Clinic. But how many purple crystals do I need to see a doctor? Fourth Master, your clinic is really unscrupulous. Chu Fian smiled. You're willing to take the bait. If you don't come in, I won't be able to do anything to you even if I eat you alive. But since you're here, don't blame me for the high price. If you can't afford to see a doctor, get out of my way. Don't hinder my business. At this moment, many people rushed over in their carriages. There were still screams in the carriages. Seeing that Bao Pingon stopped here, and that there was a clinic here, they couldn't help but stop. In any case, he had searched the entire town but was unable to find anything, so he might as well try his luck here. Bao Pingon gritted his teeth and said, Bring him in. He turned around and smiled. Fourth Master, you'll only pay after you're cured, right? If it can't be cured, if I can't cure him, will you give me money? Chu Fian rolled his eyes. Fourth Master is right, but what is the standard? Bao Pingon asked. It depends on the patient. Chu Yang was dressed in white. He stood up in an amiable manner and said, If it's serious, I'll naturally collect more. If it's a terminal illness, I'll naturally double the amount. This is? Bao Pingon blinked and asked. This is the chief physician of the Purple Crystals Huichun Hall. Chu Feiyin snorted. He's the big boss of this place, old buddy. Bao Pingon was startled. He couldn't help but carefully size up Chu Yang. Then he suddenly realized. You must be the Chu clan's eldest young master, right? Bao Pingon greeted the young master. I didn't expect young master to have learned such great skills after being away for so many years. Chu Yang's words were a little ambiguous. Chu Yang said lightly, I'm a physician, and a physician has the heart of a parent. Let's treat him first. Hearing the words a physician has the heart of a parent, Chu Fian, who had just picked up a cup of wine, spat it out and hurriedly turned his head. You little brat, you really dare to speak. Bao Pingon nodded and smiled. He looked deeply at Chu Yang and waved his hand, saying, Young master, please take a look. Can you treat this injury? The person who was carried in was a third-grade martial king. Under the treatment of Yang San, he was in so much pain that he was hovering between life and death. His face was sallow, and his body was still twitching. He glared at Chu Yang, gritted his teeth, and hissed, Little, if you can't treat this grandpa will kill you alive. This guy only cared about the pain just now and didn't hear anything that was said just now. Not only did he not know that Chu Fian was beside him, but he also didn't know that this was the Chu clan's medical center. Of course, he also didn't know that his words had sent his own life to the gates of hell. Bao Pingon shouted, Shut up. He looked nervously at Chu Fian, afraid that he would get angry. Chu Fian's eyes flashed, but he didn't say anything. He just smiled and looked at the man who was in so much pain. There was even a hint of schadenfreude in his eyes. He thought to himself, Your words have angered my nephew. It's worse than offending the real king of hell. Why should I be angry with a dead man? Chu Yang's eyes flashed and he smiled, saying, His injury is so serious. As he said, he bent down and patted here and there, pinching there, and picking the painful spots. But his face became more and more solemn. At the last moment, he held the man's waist and twisted it hard. With a cracking sound, the man screamed, spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted. You! Bao Pingon was furious. It turns out that it's such a vicious martial art. Divine Dr. Chu looked solemn and compassionate. He suddenly turned his head and said, What are you doing? Why are you pointing at me angrily? Bao Pingon's face was extremely awkward. From his tone, it seemed that this young man had recognized this kind of injury. This was something that he hadn't expected. He hurriedly smiled apologetically. Young master, please enlighten me. What kind of injury is this? You don't know? Chu Yang looked at him in surprise. I don't know. Bao Pingon smiled bitterly. He thought, if I knew, why would I ask you? I'm not asking for it. You don't know? What's your name? Chu Yang stared at him. I thought you knew. Bao Pingon was speechless. As far as I know, this martial art should have been lost. Chu Yang frowned. Why did it appear again? Who could be so vicious as to cultivate such an atrocious kung fu? Young master, this is. Bao Pingon became honest this time. Oh, no wonder you don't know. I also saw it in an ancient book by chance. Tens of thousands of years ago. This martial art was called Flying Finger of Netherworld. It's a vicious martial art. As long as it's used, it'll be worse than death. The joints in the body will automatically collide with each other and can't be controlled. If it's not treated within 3 days, the joints will definitely break and the person will become disabled. Flying Finger of Netherworld? Hearing this terrifying name, Bao Pingon sucked in a breath of cold air. Full of hope, he asked, Young master, can you cure it? It can be treated. It can be treated, but... Chu Yang dragged his tone. This kind of injury is not easy to treat. Not only does it consume energy, but it also consumes elixirs. Most importantly, do you have enough medical fees? In other words, purple crystals? Bao Pingon was happy and worried at once. He was happy because he finally found someone who could treat it. He was worried because the other party seemed to be ready to take advantage of him. From the looks of it, the butcher's knife has already been raised. Bao Pingon smiled bitterly. But I don't know, is one purple crystal enough for each person? Are you insulting me? Chu Yang was furious. He rolled his eyes and waved his hand. Fourth uncle, send the guests out. Don't. Bao Pingon wanted to cry but had no tears. He hurriedly stopped Chu Yang. Young master, the price is negotiable. 10 purple crystals for each person. Bao Pingon was shocked when Chu Yang opened his mouth. There were more than 20 people in the Bao clan who were injured. So it would be more than 200 purple crystals? This was a huge fortune. Isn't it too little? Chu Fian said reproachfully. Yang, you're too soft-hearted. Soft-hearted. Bao Pingon was crying in his heart at this moment. He almost wanted to rush up and chop Chu Fian into mincemeat. 10 purple crystals for each person. That would be 100,000 white crystals. This guy actually said that he was soft-hearted. What would happen if he hardened his heart? Chu Yang smiled and said earnestly, Fourth uncle, a doctor has the heart of a parent. Chu Fian nodded. This is very reasonable. Bao Pingon's face was full of tears. What kind of parent's heart is this? If someone had such heartless parents, he or she would definitely not be able to live past 1 month. Young Master Chu, can you lower the price? Bao Pingon's face was bitter. There was a hint of pleading in his voice. It's really too expensive. You think it's too expensive? You think it's too expensive? Chu Yang flicked his sleeves. I didn't ask you to treat me. Bao Pingon was stunned. Steward. The 20 or so injured people of the Bao clan shouted at the same time. They were listening at the side. When they were in so much pain that they couldn't bear it anymore. It was really a blessing that fell from the sky for someone to treat their injuries. Now that they saw that the steward had the intention to shirk the price, they couldn't help but plead at the same time. Bao Pingon was in a dilemma. Although he was the steward of the Bao clan, he wasn't the clan master. 10 purple crystals for each of the 20 or so injured people. This was more than 200 purple crystals. How could he dare to make this decision? But if he didn't treat them, he really couldn't bring himself to say it. There were so many people here from all the big clans who were watching. If he didn't treat them, the consequences would be unimaginable. He was afraid that the hearts of the people of the Bao clan would immediately disperse. They had risked their lives for the Bao clan, and now they were seriously injured because of the Bao clan. How could you not treat them? Then who would work for you in the future? So whether Bao Pingon was treated or not, he would be a scapegoat. If he treated them, who would pay for such a large sum of wealth when he returned? Wouldn't he be skinned alive by the clan master? If he didn't treat them, all right, the clan master would say. It's not that I don't want to treat you, but Bao Pingon rejected me at that time. Then he would definitely be a scapegoat. Maybe one day, he would be plotted against by these people and die without a burial ground. So are you going to treat them or not? Chu Yang looked at him very reasonably. If you don't want to treat them, then make way. There are still people waiting. Immediately there were shouts outside. Bao Pingon, are you going to fucking treat them or not? Don't fucking ignore us like a dead person. The grandpas are still waiting here. Why are you fucking occupying the latrine pit and not taking a shit? The people who spoke were from the Liao clan. Bao Pingon cried without tears. Your clan master's son-in-law is among the injured people of the Liao clan. Of course you dare to treat them. But what about me? Among the injured people on my side, is there an important person? The clamor at the back became louder and louder, especially those who were injured and waiting for treatment. They even cursed Bao Pingon's ancestors. Bao Pingon closed his eyes and finally made up his mind. I'll treat them. If you want to treat them, then carry them in. Divine Dr. Chu waved his hands excitedly. Go in, one by one. One by one, pay purple crystals first. Everyone 10 purple crystals for one person. There will be no pain at all. If you want to treat them, pay the purple crystals in advance. I won't accept anything else. My fourth uncle is an accountant and a waiter. He pays the money and delivers the goods at the same time. Chapter 755. Divine Dr. Chu's shout was just like a solo performer in Jianghu. He was just short of saying, those who have money help me out. Those who don't help me out. The experts from various big clans looked at each other. Damn it, I've long heard that the eldest grandson of the Chu clan was lost. Now he said that he was found. But looking at this situation, could it be that he's a swindler who's making a living outside? They couldn't help but look at Chu Fian suspiciously. Chu Fian's face was full of black lines. But he didn't dare to flare up and stood up. It's so shameful. I'm really shameful today. I'm the fourth master of the Chu clan. I'm also a reputable person in Flat Mountain Ridge. But I didn't expect that I've not only become a shop assistant who sells aphrodisiac, but also become a swindler. Chu Yang shouted once, and even took out a big basin to act as a cashier. He winked at Bao Pingon and smiled. Manager Bao, put in the purple crystals. Don't worry, I'll take care of the injured. Bao Pingon looked at this greedy face with grief and indignation. He really wanted to spit into this mouth that was full of saliva. Helplessly, he placed 10 pieces of glittering purple crystals inside. He hurriedly called for a follower, and told him to return home to report, and retrieve the purple crystals while he was at it. How could he bring more than 200 purple crystals with him when he was out? Wouldn't that be asking for a robbery? Divine Dr. Chu strode into the clinic. He was neither hurried nor slow, and had a well-thought-out plan. The person who was just carried in was the big man who scolded Chu Yang just now. So Minister Chu naturally wanted to give him proper treatment. After entering, he saw that the big man was already lying on the bed. Divine Dr. Chu waved his hand. All of you go out. I'll treat this strong man. The two big men didn't dare to say anything and quietly walked out. Divine Dr. Chu drew the curtain with a swoosh. Then he slapped that guy's shoulder. This was the place where he hit with his finger, and it was also the most painful place. The people outside only heard a sound like ah, ouch, oh, and then there was no more movement. The burly man suddenly woke up from the severe pain and shouted. Then, Divine Dr. Chu slapped him on the waist again, and he fainted again. He woke up and fainted again. Then he would wake up and faint again. Divine Dr. Chu's expression was calm. He bemoaned the state of the universe, and pitied the fate of mankind. His face was solemn, which was the standard look of a doctor's parental heart. At first glance, one could tell that he was as kind as an angel. This cycle repeated itself exactly once. The big man was in so much pain that he was sweating profusely. Even the bed was soaked in sweat. His black face had turned into a waxy yellow color, and he could no longer speak. Occasionally, he would wake up and look at Divine Dr. Chu with pleading eyes. Divine Dr. Chu finally started. He lifted up one of the man's legs and used all his strength to lift it up. Immediately, another hellish wail and howl was heard. Then she lifted his other leg and turned him over with a smack. The big man's eyes rolled back, and this time, he fell into a deep coma. How dare you scold me? Divine Dr. Chu muttered to himself. Fuck you. If I don't let you roll in the 18 levels of hell, you won't know what the king of hell looks like. Only then did the real treatment begin. He pointed his finger at his throat, which instantly transformed into a finger hammer, and tapped his shoulder. His other hand tapped his tailbone at the same time, which instantly transformed into a palm, and pushed upwards. A cracking sound came from an unknown place. The unconscious big man's face also revealed a hint of comfort. Obviously he had recovered. Divine Dr. Chu frowned and took out a big piece of Coptis chinensis from the tribulation space. He crushed it into powder with both hands, pinched the big man's nose with 2 fingers, opened his mouth and sprinkled the powder into his mouth. Then he clapped his hands and stretched his hands into the water basin at the side. He lifted the water droplets and dripped them on his face. At first glance, it seemed that his face was full of sweat. Then, he walked out weakly and leaned against the door frame, as if he could not stand. He said weakly, "Next one." He looked like a weak person who had just finished a 5-kilometer cross-country run. The sweat on his face was dripping down. The people outside were a little frightened when they heard the screams inside. But when they saw Divine Dr. Chu's current appearance, they all gasped. It seemed that this injury was really difficult to treat. This young and strong Divine Doctor was actually so tired. Chu Fian was taken aback and stood up. "Yang, are you okay?" Chu Yang said weakly, I can still hold on. Fourth uncle, those purple crystals aren't fake, right?" Chu Fian suddenly realized that this guy was pretending. He almost couldn't help but kick him. He said angrily, "They're all real." "That's good. My hard work was not in vain." Divine Dr. Chu sighed with relief. "It's really too tiring to treat such evil skills from ancient times." Chu Fian turned his head and pretended that he didn't hear anything. Bao Pingon said worriedly, "Divine Dr. Chu, can you still hold on?" At this time, someone had already carried out the man inside. His limbs were swollen like steamed buns, and his breathing was weak. But the previous twitching and spasming situation had already disappeared. Obviously, Divine Dr. Chu had already treated him. Bao Pingon went forward and checked with his hands. He was immediately relieved and said emotionally, "Divine Dr. Chu is really an expert. He actually healed his injuries in such a short period of time." This sentence was really amazing. The people from the other clans outside were still observing. Seeing that it was indeed effective, they immediately clamored, "Treat us first! Treat us first!" A big man was lying on the stretcher and crying loudly, "Treat me first, it's so painful." This person was the son-in-law of the Liao clan's clan master. This guy was used to living like a prince. When had he ever suffered such pain? Now that he finally saw hope, he couldn't bear it anymore. Chu Fian frowned and shouted, "Line up! How can it be so noisy? This is treating a patient, not buying groceries." Everyone was afraid of his prestige and didn't dare to be rash. They were angry but didn't dare to say anything. Bao Pingon had already put in another 10 purple crystals. He said respectfully, "Divine Dr. Chu, thank you." He waved his hand, and another person was carried in. Chu Yang walked in shakily. Bao Pingon said attentively, "Divine Doctor, since you're so tired, why don't I send someone to help you?" Chu Yang looked at him from the corner of his eyes and said, "When someone is injured by such vicious martial arts, every treatment must not be wrong. Once there's a mistake, he'll be disabled for life. Do you know how much strength to use with your clumsy hands and feet? How to rotate? How to pierce? How to stretch? How to spiral? How much to pierce? How to react? How to react?" Bao Pingon's face was full of cold sweat. "Then I'll have to trouble you." Chu Yang snorted and said, "Do you think it's so easy to earn these 10 purple crystals? I'm also risking my life." Bao Pingon deeply agreed. Seeing that Divine Dr. Chu was so tired, and his face was so pale, he couldn't help but say, "Divine Doctor, you've worked hard." He thought in his heart, "It's best that you die of exhaustion after treating my clans." As Chu Fian received the purple crystals, he was laughing in his heart. He coughed and said, "Line up according to the order of receiving the purple crystals. Not even a single purple crystal less. I don't want an extra purple crystal." Everyone despised him. Look at this uncle. In order to earn purple crystals, he actually doesn't care about the life and death of his nephew. Can't he see that he's so tired that he can't even crawl? But of course they wouldn't expose him. Anyway, even if he died of exhaustion, he was still a member of the Chu clan. As long as he finished treating our injuries before he died of exhaustion, it would be fine. Some who didn't bring enough purple crystals hurriedly sent people back home to get more. If the Divine Doctor died of exhaustion, there would be no one to treat them. Just at this moment, a ghost-like wail and wolf-like howl came from inside again. This time, the sound was even more terrifying. After a while, Divine Dr. Chu walked out while wiping his sweat. When he walked, he actually staggered a little, and his footsteps were weak. He only gave Chu Fian a look. Chu Fian understood tacitly. Next, holding a bunch of purple crystals, he beamed with delight. My nephew is really too awesome. After treating all these people today, it's enough for the Chu clan's income for half a year. He's really the king of Hell Chu. He's really good at making money. Everyone's eyes were spitting fire. They couldn't wait to snatch the purple crystals. After another ghost-like wail and wolf-like howl, Chu Fian didn't wait for Chu Yang to come out. He directly shouted without raising his head. Next. Wait, hand over the purple crystals first. You want to take advantage of me? Bao Pingon was extremely speechless. He could only put down another 10 purple crystals, seeing that the 30 purple crystals he had with him had already been used up, but the clan still hadn't sent anyone to deliver them. He couldn't help but feel anxious. These 30 purple crystals were the total cost of treating the injuries this time. At this moment, the crowd outside separated into two sides. A group of valiant-looking men in green drove a carriage over. Without exception, screams could be heard from the carriage. They were from the Shao clan. The whole area was the territory of the Shao clan. The person who came was the second steward of the Shao clan in the flat mountain ridge. Although Chu Fian didn't have a close relationship with this person, he knew him quite well. He didn't dare to neglect him. He stood up and politely said, "So it's Brother Shao who came personally. Why, is there someone in your clan injured too?" The leader of the group was a man with a square face and big ears. He looked very amiable, but his eyes were cold. He cupped his hands and smiled. "Fourth Elder Chu, to tell you the truth, someone took away some of our prestige last night. It was extremely embarrassing." The flat mountain ridge was the territory of the Chu clan. This steward of the Shao clan didn't dare to be presumptuous. He changed the topic and said with a smile, "Fourth Elder Chu, I heard that this medical center belongs to your clan? Nephew, can it treat such injuries? Is that right?" Chu Fian laughed mischievously and pulled him aside. He said, "To tell you the truth, my nephew has just returned. He doesn't have any family assets. So, he thought of a way to open a clinic here. He can earn some daily necessities and some crystals for cultivation." He blinked his eyes with a look that said, I know everyone knows." The man in green obviously understood the situation of the Chu clan very well. He let out a long "oh" and smiled. "I see. There's nothing wrong with this." Chu Yang heard the movements outside and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows slightly. People from the Shao clan. Chapter 756. Chu Yang smiled sinisterly. "I've also injured many people from the Shao clan last night. Humph, it's just that I'm not strong enough now. Should I save some face for the Shao clan?" The sword spirit also pondered in the tribulation space and said, "With your current strength, you don't even have a firm foothold in the Chu clan. If you rashly clash with the Shao clan, you won't be able to contend with them. If they go overboard, you can give in a little." The sword spirit's words were purely out of good intentions, and it was also the most appropriate way to deal with the current situation. However, this sentence made Chu Yang feel very aggrieved. He nodded deeply and said, "All right, on the surface, of course, I have to save some face for them." The sword spirit's heart skipped a beat. "On the surface? Do you still want to do anything in the interior? You've already injured more than 20 people, and you still feel aggrieved? I've never seen such a person who can only take advantage of others without suffering any losses." Chu Yang faintly smiled. "Sword spirit, you finally understand me." The sword spirit was surprised. "What?" Chu Yang said, "My biggest advantage is my temper. I'd rather take advantage of others than suffer losses." The sword spirit was speechless and directly retreated. Outside, Chu Fian saw that the other party had understood. He laughed and took advantage of the situation, saying, "Actually, I didn't take much. My nephew only took 10 purple crystals per person for these kinds of injuries that no one knows about." The face of the man in green twitched. He couldn't help but look at the carriage behind him. There are many people inside. If 10 purple crystals per person, 220 purple crystals would fly away just like that. This price is a little too high. The man in green shook his head repeatedly. Brother Xiao, you're wrong. Xu Fian's face became serious, and he lowered his voice. This is a good opportunity to buy people's hearts. Besides, my nephew just came back. Brother Xiao, you're his elder. Just take it as a greeting gift. This Brother Xiao obviously didn't prepare a greeting gift. He looked embarrassed. Brother Chu, it's really too expensive. Xu Fian lowered his voice. Since Brother Xiao is here, I have to give you face no matter what. How about this? You put down the purple crystals first. After you're done, I'll secretly give you another half. I have to give you face. Xu Fian knew that if the other party wanted a discount, he couldn't refuse. But he had to give face, and he couldn't appear weak. They could only operate under the table like this. After all, the Xiao clan was one of the dominant clans in the heaven layer. The Chu clan could not afford to offend the Xiao clan. Furthermore, his nephew had just entered the Chu clan. If he offended the Xiao clan for the sake of the Chu clan, he was afraid that he would never be able to hold his head up high in the Chu clan in the future. Therefore, he could only pretend to have the upper hand and suffer a loss in secret. In fact, Fourth Master Chu was calculating in his heart. 5 purple crystals per person was also a huge sum of wealth. After all, he only received 12 purple crystals from the clan in a year. 1 purple crystal per month. Now, even if there were 5 pieces, it would still be 110 purple crystals. It was a huge fortune. Hearing Xu Fian's words, the steward of the Xiao clan still had a look of displeasure on his face. Finally, he nodded his head and said, Fourth Elder Chu, I'm really grateful for your generosity. Xu Fian laughed and said, Brother Yulong, you're too polite. So this person was called Xiao Yulong. Inside the room, Chu Yang was fiercely tormenting the man. The man on the bed was screaming out of breath. He was hovering between life and death. He was alive and dead, but his ears were pricked up, and he was listening to the conversation outside. Half. Then I'm losing out. Big Boss Chu was furious. He could not help but exert more strength. The man under him screamed, Grandpa. He just woke up and fainted again. On the other side, Xiao Yulong and Steward Zhao's eyes also flashed with a cold light. They smiled and thought, Motherfucker, I've never seen such a black price in the world. You even gave me a discount. Let's treat him first, and then we'll come and rob your little medical center at night. Even if you, Old Fourth Chu, are alone, you won't be our match. But this matter needs to be done seamlessly without leaving any traces. Who should I send? Thinking, he smiled and came to Bao Pingan. He said kindly, Steward Bao. Bao Pingan's face was bitter. Brother Xiao. How many people do you have here? Xiao Yulong dragged his words. There are 10 more people. Soon. Bao Pingan wiped his sweat. Do you have enough purple crystals? Xiao Yulong naturally knew. With Bao Pingan's status, how could he bring so many purple crystals with him? I've already sent someone home to get them. They'll be back soon. Bao Pingan smiled bitterly. So you don't have any purple crystals now? Xiao Yulong said with a fake smile. If that's the case, are we just going to wait for you? Why don't I add some food? Tell me, isn't this a little bullying? Although he said that he was warm, and that he would never bully others, his stance was clearly bullying others. And after bullying people, he still had to make them say, No, I'm definitely not bullying people. Inside, Chu Yang was full of admiration. Damn it, this guy is even more shameless than me. Bao Pingan looked around for help. But who would offend the powerful Xiao clan for a steward of the Bao clan? One by one, they turned their faces away. There were even some who were laughing at his misfortune. Just as Chu Yang expected. No, Brother Xiao has always been benevolent and righteous. Why would he bully people? Bao Pingan said humbly. If that's the case, I'll be behind Brother Xiao. As soon as he said this, the 10 people in the Bao clan who were waiting for treatment started moaning loudly. Oh heavens, this kind of pain is a matter of life and death for even a blink of an eye. But someone actually stuffed it in. They suddenly felt that there was nothing left to live for. Xiao Yulong said guiltily. This is not good, right? Brother Xiao, what are you saying? Since Brother Xiao has stepped forward, even if you don't say it, Our Bao clan is also willing to take a step back, Bao Pingon said righteously, but he was cursing Xiao Yulong's mother in his heart. Damn it, I've never seen such a shameless person. Then, I'll add food, really add food? Xiao Yulong asked inquisitively. Bao Pingon's face finally twitched. He turned his head away with a black face. This time, even Chu Fian could not bear to see it. Damn it, he had already taken a step back, but you're still so unforgiving. Do you have to force him to death? He could not help but cough. Chu Yang's voice came from inside at the right time. Next. Xiao Yulong waved his hand, and the people from the Xiao clan immediately rushed over and carried the people inside. Xiao Yulong gave a look to one of the people behind him. That person understood and went into a carriage. Then, a clapping sound could be heard from the carriage. Then, he walked out with a parcel. Xiao Yulong took the parcel from him and placed it in a basin in front of Chu Fian. He smiled and said, "Fourth Elder Chu, here are 220 purple crystals. Please count them." With a clatter, the purple crystals in the parcel were poured out. There was an uproar all around. Chu Fian was so angry that he almost fainted. There were indeed 220 purple crystals in the parcel, but they were half the size of ordinary purple crystals. It turned out that the cracking sound in the carriage was actually caused by the purple crystals being cut into two halves. This was pure humiliation. Furthermore, it was bullying. Xiao Yulong used this method to express his dissatisfaction with Chu Fian, charging him a huge sum of purple crystals. At the same time, it also showed that the Xiao clan could do whatever they wanted in this region. Whoever dared to disobey would end up like these broken purple crystals. Even if they were expensive, I can break them if I want to. Bao Pingon, who had just been humiliated, laughed in schadenfreude. There was silence all around. Everyone wanted to see how Chu Fian would deal with this matter. Chu Fian's hands started to tremble, and his face turned purple. Just as he was about to explode, he saw the door curtain open. Chu Yang's footsteps were weak, and he almost fell down as he walked over. "Fourth uncle, what's wrong?" Chu Fian was shocked and stood up. "I'm tired. Fourth uncle, please help me recover my body. So many people are waiting. I'm very anxious," Chu Yang said weakly. Chu Fian hurriedly went over and used his martial arts to help his nephew recover his body. Chu Yang took the opportunity to fall into his arms. Chu Fian felt a sharp pain on his thigh. Chu Yang had pinched him hard. He suddenly realized that he could not have any conflict with the Xiao clan at this time and place. He slowly calmed down. Chu Yang leaned on Chu Fian's arms. His face was pale, and his lips were a little blue. He looked at Xiao Yulong weakly and said, "Steward Xiao, please don't be impatient. It's really my body is too weak, cough 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 cough. I'm not confident. Don't blame me, don't blame me. I'll be fine soon." Xiao Yulong blinked and smiled sinisterly. He said, "Young brother Chu, I'll help you too. Our Xiao clan is the orthodox Xian technique in the world." As he said, he reached out and held Chu Yang's other hand. In the space, the sword spirit twitched his mouth. "Your Xiao clan is the orthodox Xian technique? Damn it. Your hands are too rough to carry shoes for the orthodox Xian technique." Chu Yang was overjoyed. "Thank you, Steward Xiao." Xiao Yulong held Chu Yang's hand, and all his doubts disappeared. It's not that this young man has no cultivation, but that it has been destroyed. Transferring cultivation to him is like dropping into a bottomless pit. It can only help him recover his physical strength, and nothing else. Suddenly such a thing happened. All the doctors were unable to treat him, but at such a critical moment, a young man suddenly appeared who could treat him, and charged such an expensive fee. How could Xiao Yulong not be suspicious? Even if this young man was not the disciple of that short and fat troublemaker, they were definitely related. He wasn't the only one. Everyone present had the same suspicion. After all, no one was stupid. They would investigate this matter immediately after Chu Yang was cured. But Xiao Yulong had already concluded that even if this young man was related, it wouldn't be a big deal. What could a cripple do? He thought deeper. Even if that person wanted to do this, he would do it very secretly. Why would he do it in such a big way? As such, the doubts in his heart slowly disappeared. Now he grabbed Chu Yang's hand and couldn't pull it back. How could he take it back when he said that he wanted to help Chu Yang recover? Wouldn't that be slapping his own face? Xiao Yulong could only frown and transfer his cultivation over reluctantly. Chu Yang was shocked and said happily, "Fourth uncle, let go. Steward Zhao's Xian technique is indeed orthodox. Once it's transferred, it's much more comfortable than yours. If you transfer it at the same time, the two Xian techniques will clash. I feel so uncomfortable." Xiao Yulong's face darkened at once. Wasn't this fucking taking him as a worker? Chapter 757. While enjoying Xiao Yulong's vital energy, Chu Yang moaned comfortably and explained cautiously, "Steward Xiao, this kind of vicious injury is very difficult to treat." "I know." Xiao Yulong's face was black. He continued to transfer his precious energy, gritting his teeth and his cheeks twitching. Chu Yang narrowed his eyes comfortably. "Well, it's really comfortable." Xiao Yulong was furious and almost stopped working. "You fucking treat me as a prostitute in a brothel?" However, Chu Yang was already talking nonstop. "Moreover, before the treatment, I need to meticulously help the seniors move their muscles and bones. After all, they have to return to their original positions in order to get the treatment done in one fell swoop. It may be very painful. Please remind everyone in advance so that they can be mentally prepared. Otherwise, I won't be able to bear it if the seniors move around in pain. Don't blame me." Xiao Yulong gritted his teeth and said, "We're all Jianghu people. We're used to life and death. Who will be afraid of pain?" Chu Yang chattered, "If it's just blaming, it's fine. But I'm not skilled enough. If they move at the critical moment and make a mistake, they'll be disabled for life." Xiao Yulong nodded with a gloomy face. He turned his face and shouted, "Did you all hear that?" "We heard." Although the wounded were in pain and sweating, they still forced themselves to answer. Chu Yang laughed and said, "Thank you, thank you. Thank you for your understanding. Actually, besides being a little greedy, I don't have any major problems." Xiao Yulong was a little impatient. "Are you almost done?" Chu Yang felt for a while. "It's really effective. You're indeed the orthodox one. Ha ha ha. Every time my fourth uncle helps me recover, it takes half an hour. Steward Xiao, you didn't even use half an hour. You're amazing." Chu Fian lowered his head in grief and indignation. He gritted his teeth in his heart. "Damn it, your fourth uncle is too useless. When did I help you recover? Half an hour?" Xiao Yulong's face looked better. He said kindly, "Sorry to trouble you, nephew Chu." Chu Yang chuckled. He was pure and innocent, kind and benevolent. Then he said with compassion, No, a doctor has the heart of a parent." Xiao Yulong's face twitched and his whole body seemed to shiver. He turned his face away. At the side, Bao Pingan, who was also choked by the words "a doctor has the heart of a parent," felt very comfortable, as if he had taken a cold bath on a hot day. "You deserve it. Who asked you to bully others? Now you've experienced the feeling of eating a fly?" Chu Yang stood up and walked in energetically. Inside were the injured members of the Xiao clan. The moment Chu Yang entered the door, the smile in his eyes had already turned into a cruel and vicious one. "You actually cut open my purple crystals? You're really fuck. If I don't have fuck, how would I be worthy of those broken chi, and of those spiritual aura of those broken Xiao of his with his hands Zhao's and Xiao. Xiao was to Xiao of his Xiao of the to him, of he to was stopped. Of Xiao of the Zhaos. Everyone was an expert. How could they not know that the person had fainted while screaming? They couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. The person inside is famous for not being afraid of death and pain. Yet he actually screamed so miserably. Then, how much pain must he be in? Screams of agony came from the inside. And the people outside broke out in a cold sweat. After a long time, after the last scream, which sounded as if his heart was about to be vomited out, Divine Dr. Chu walked out slowly. Next, he felt a little weak again. The screams didn't stop. This wasn't a clinic. It was a slaughterhouse. It had been dark for 2 hours. The night wind was blowing, accompanied by the screams. This place was as scary as hell. After finishing the fourth person, Chu Yang was already drifting in the wind. His steps were light, and he even fell down. He didn't look for Chu Fian anymore. Instead, he went directly to Xiao Yulong and smiled sincerely. "Steward Xiao, please help me recover. You're fast. Xiao Yulong's nose was crooked. Sure enough, he's treating me as a worker. But what Chu Yang said was reasonable. You're fast. Now the people of the Xiao clan were waiting for treatment. Everyone was in an abyss of suffering. If you're fast, you'll suffer less. So, they all looked at Xiao Yulong with pleading eyes. Xiao Yulong gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. He squeezed out a smile. That's how it should be. Then he continued to work. As soon as Xiao Yulong channeled his martial arts, Divine Dr. Chu moaned rhythmically, like a wild cat calling for spring. Xiao Yulong's hair stood on end, and he almost vomited out his food. Damn it. Those who can see will of course know that I'm helping you recover. Those who can't see and hear this sound will think that I'm moaning? This cycle repeated. When the treatment of the 22 people of the Xiao clan was completed, the moon was already high in the sky. Xiao Yulong's face was pale, and he was weak. Half of it was because he was tired, half of it was because he was angry, and some of it was because he was shy. Anyone who heard a man moaning and moaning a few times would feel like this. In the end, Divine Dr. Chu just touched Xiao Yulong's hand and didn't start to deliver the medicine, but he called out. Everyone looked at Xiao Yulong with ambiguous eyes. No matter how thick-skinned Xiao Yulong and Steward Xiao were, they also felt as if they were sitting on pins and needles. Xiao Yulong brought the people of the Xiao clan and left the place almost at the speed of light. When they left, Chu Fian could see that even Xiao Yulong's neck had turned red at this time. The people of the Bao clan had already sent the purple crystals over. Then, it was the people of the Bao clan and the Liao clan. Xiao Yulong dared to cut the purple crystals, but these people definitely didn't dare to. If another clan did this, Chu Fian would definitely kill them immediately. There was no doubt about this. The treatment went on till dawn. Finally, it was finished. No one realized that Divine Dr. Chu's treatment speed had gradually sped up. It was just that when boiling a frog in warm water, the frog would be scooped out before the water boiled. So, no one realized it. What Chu Yang couldn't figure out was, why didn't Qin Baoshan, who was in charge of the Hall of Justice, come? Could it be that he could treat himself? This couldn't be right. Although the finger that day wasn't the yin-yang soul-dispersing hand, it was also the unique skill of the first-generation Calamity Sword Master, Meridian Sealing Finger. Now, the sword spirit had transformed it into Meridian Shattering Finger. If old Qin didn't come in 3 days, his arm would really be crippled. Moreover, the people of the other clans had come, but the people of the Chu clan didn't? What was going on? Not only Chu Yang couldn't figure out this matter, but Chu Fian also couldn't figure it out. They busied themselves all the way until daybreak. Only then did they send off the evil spirits. The uncle and nephew duo immediately closed the door and lay down on the bed. I'm so tired. Chu Fian groaned. After lying on the bed for a while, he got up again. But it's worth it. So many purple crystals, haha. It's so satisfying. I've never earned so many purple crystals in a single day in my entire life. This feeling is too blissful. Fourth uncle, what are you talking about? There are 2 problems with your words. Chu Yang raised 2 fingers. What are the 2 problems? Chu Fian was stunned. Firstly, these purple crystals were earned by me in a day, not by you. Secondly, most of these purple crystals are mine. So, I should say that I'm blissful, but you can only say that it's satisfying. I'll strangle you, you little brat. Chu Fian was furious and was about to pounce on Chu Yang to teach him a lesson. Stop. Chu Yang raised his hand. Fourth uncle, let's settle the accounts first and see how much we earned today. The uncle and nephew pounced on the huge pile of purple crystals like money grubbers. 1 piece, 2 pieces, 10 pieces, 50 pieces, 100 pieces, 100 pieces, 100 pieces, 180 pieces, 355 pieces. Chu Fian gasped. Complete purple crystals, 470 pieces. My God. This is the Chu clan's income for half a year. And it's much more than that. This is the income of thousands of people in our clan. Chu Yang snorted and said, can those incomplete ones be used? There's no effect when the purple crystals are cut. Only a lot of spiritual energy will leak out from the cut, but it's not a big deal. Chu Fian said. But it's hard to swallow this. Indeed. Chu Yang agreed. As he spoke, He kept all the purple crystals into a big bag and beamed with delight. Then, he took out 10 pieces of broken purple crystals to make up 5 pieces. Fourth uncle, take these and use them. Chu Fian looked at the mountain-like bag in Chu Yang's hands, and then looked at the 5 pieces in his own hands. He was a little dazed. What? To split the loot? Chu Yang said matter-of-factly, Fourth uncle, you've worked hard today. Use these purple crystals to nourish your body. Let's continue tomorrow. Chu Fian looked at him in a daze, and then looked down at the purple crystals in his hands. Then he raised his head and slowly opened his mouth. I only have these? Chu Yang had already picked up the bag and walked to the door. Fourth uncle, don't think it's too much. We'll have a lot of money in the future. Then he left. Chu Fian was stunned in the room. After a long time he rushed out furiously. Bastard! Stop right there. Do you really think that I'll drink the soup while you eat the meat? You only gave me 5 pieces of this much. I'm your fucking uncle. Aye. Do you think I'm a beggar? After shouting furiously for a while, he realized that Big Boss Chu had already disappeared. Chu Fian panted heavily and walked back and forth in the courtyard. He jumped back and forth and scolded. Little bastard! You've gone too far. Little bastard! You've gone too far. I'm so pissed off. Don't let me see you. As long as I see you, Yes, you'll go and confess in front of grandfather. Say that you found me but didn't bring me back. Big Boss Chu walked out of his room with a smile on his face. He looked elegant and at ease. Chu Fian stared at him. After a long time he sighed and wanted to cry. You'll continue to bully me. I didn't even cry when Xiao Yulong humiliated me earlier. Now I actually want to cry. He really wanted to cry. Including the broken purple crystals, there were 100 of them. They flew away from his hands just like that. He only had 5 pieces. And they were broken defective ones. Chu Yang sighed. Fourth uncle, I took them because I can. And I have a reason to. If you take them, you can only hand them to the clan. But if we hand them over, what about Luer's illness? Chapter 758. Chu Fian suddenly realized. Chu Yang was right. He had just arrived at the upper 3 heavens. Even if he made a fortune, no one would have the nerve to take advantage of him. Moreover, the entire clan felt indebted to Chu Yang. At this time, the clan had not arranged any tasks for Chu Yang. In other words, Chu Yang did not have any income now. Even this medical center was given to the clan by Chu Failing, according to the market price. It was equivalent to Chu Yang's personal property. Of course, this was Chu Yang's insistence. However, facts were facts after all. On the contrary, if this wealth was in his hands, it would be different. Chu Failong only needed to obey the clan to take over the purple crystals in his hands. Then, what would he use to buy medicine for Luer in the future? These purple crystals seemed to be a lot. But if he wanted to buy the 8 medicinal herbs that Chu Luer needed, it would not be enough to buy even one of them. And, what would Chu Yang use to cultivate in the future? Chu Fian sighed dejectedly. What you said makes sense. I'm just a shop assistant. These are also a lot. But Luer's illness can't be delayed. Why don't you take back these 5 crystals? Chu Fian's words seemed to be said in a fit of pique, but they were sincere. He really wanted to do this. Chu Yang did not know whether to laugh or cry. Fourth uncle, we'll use these cut open purple crystals for cultivation in the future. Anyway, the energy is the same, and the spiritual energy is the same. Moreover, it's impossible to use them after they've been cut open. That's true. Chu Fian nodded and scolded. Little brat. If there's anything in the future, tell me first. You should have told me first, motherfucker. You make fourth uncle angry every day. You're really unfilial. Chu Yang lowered his head. Are you tired today? Chu Fian said. Go and rest. Tired? How can I be tired? Chu Yang raised his head amused. Tell me the truth. How long would it take to treat these people? Chu Fian was always curious about this point. Chu Yang came out exhausted every time. Although he knew that it was fake, Chu Fian's heart still shrank. This guy's acting was too realistic. It should. Chu Yang frowned and calculated. It shouldn't take more than 2 hours. Chu Fian was speechless. You were able to treat more than 10 people in 2 hours, but you dragged it out for more than an entire night. tormenting those people until they were half dead. He even received a mountain of wealth. At this moment, Chu Fian looked at his nephew with admiration. Fourth uncle, with these funds in our hands, we can basically start looking for the medicine. Chu Yang tapped the purple bamboo beside him with his finger and said slowly, the information and the rewards. Fourth uncle, I'll leave this to you. Isn't this too little? Chu Feiyin was shocked. What's the use of this? Chu Yang said, you don't have to worry about this. More will come. I just need you to release the mission first. And I know that to issue a mission, you need to pay a commission. 7 missions. These 400 purple crystals are only for the initial commission. It's more than enough. Chu Feiyin said, you're right. Which organization are you going to use? What channels do you use? Use blood payers. Chu Yang said heavily. Blood payers. Chu Feiyin was shocked. Blood payers are the most expensive to issue a mission. No matter what the mission is, you need to pay 50 purple crystals as commission. And, after the mission is completed, you'll take 30% of the reward as commission. Finally, when you hand over the mission, you'll need to pay 10% of the reward as the final reward. This if it's just one mission it's fine. But these are 7 medicines. That's 7 missions. These are all heavenly treasures. The cheapest one is at least 3,000 purple crystals. The most expensive one is at least tens of thousands of purple crystals. If you want to complete all of them, you'll need more than 100,000 purple crystals. How can we afford to hire them? Chu Feiyin frowned. Even the Yi clan, the #1 dominant clan, may not be able to take out so many purple crystals. You don't have to worry about purple crystals. Chu Yang's eyes flashed with blood. I just need to issue the mission first. The earlier the better. He smiled deeply. Although blood payers are expensive, they're the fastest and most efficient. Chu Feiyin was speechless for a long time. Finally he sighed. This is a dare. It's enough to make our Chu clan lose all our assets and be removed from the upper 3 heavens. Chu Yang said lightly, when the time comes, you can issue the mission anonymously. After issuing the mission, everything will be mine. It won't have anything to do with the Chu clan. Chu Feiyin was puzzled. You can just say that a senior asked you to issue the mission. A sinister smile appeared on Chu Yang's face as he said, you still want to say that this senior's cultivation is unfathomable. In addition, I also have a treasure for you to use as collateral. After you issue the mission, I will disguise myself and go to ask about the completion of the mission. At the same time, I will resolve this matter. How are you going to smooth things over? Chu Feiyin groaned. Do you think everyone is blind? I have my ways. Chu Yang said decisively. Fourth uncle, if you want lore to get better quickly, you'll have to do what I say. I won't implicate the Chu clan, and I won't put myself in danger. Chu Yang looked deeply at Chu Feiyin. Fourth uncle, you just trust me this time. Chu Feiyin was silent and conflicted. Finally, he gritted his teeth and stomped his feet. Okay, I'll go crazy with you this time. Chu Yang nodded and looked into the distance. As he enjoyed the morning breeze, he couldn't help but think of the ancient legend. Supreme martial artist Chen Feng. He sighed slightly. Fourth uncle, if a person doesn't have great ambitions, he won't have great achievements. These hundreds of thousands of purple crystals must be obtained within 2 years. Furthermore, the amount must be more than this to ensure that nothing goes wrong. This is a heavy pressure, but it's also an unparalleled motivation. Chu Yang took a deep breath and said, as long as you're not overwhelmed by this pressure, all miracles are actually created by people. Who knows if we can't create another miracle in our hands? Chu Feiyin was full of pride and said loudly, yes. He gritted his teeth. Let's do it. That's my fourth uncle. Chu Yang chuckled. Chu Feiyin smiled helplessly and shook his head. Little rascal. He pondered for a while. He said, Chu Yang, do you feel it? You've changed into someone else? Chu Yang sat on the stone stool between the purple bamboos and stroked the purple bamboos. Oh, both of us are here, so let's not talk like we're strangers. When you were in the lower 3 heavens, you controlled everything. You were the king of Hell Chu in black robes and black clothes. You were cold and stern. As you chatted, millions of Diwu Qingrou's troops were annihilated. At that time, you were so steady and magnanimous. Chu Feiyin pondered and said carefully. But now, you've become slippery and a little out of tune. You make others think that you're a child. I don't believe that this is your true love. Chu Yang looked at Chu Feiyin with interest. Fourth uncle, do you mean that my true love is like the king of Hell Chu in the lower three heavens? Yes, Chu Feiyin said sincerely. The king of Hell Chu is a legend. Chu Yang smiled faintly and shook his head. Fourth uncle, you're wrong. He stroked the purple bamboos with his hand and looked far away. He said softly, times have changed. In the lower three heavens, I had to be like that in order to complete my tasks. Now, in the upper three heavens, the king of Hell Chu, who used to be all-powerful, is just a nobody who can be bullied by anyone. If I were to show my steady and magnanimous attitude now, who would I be? Who would I show my authority to? Even in the Chu clan, no one would fall for it. They would try their best to reject it. Chu Yang was obviously in pain. Moreover, once this gets out, it would give people the impression that the Chu clan has just found a new Grand Duke. He's scheming and shrewd. He's a scary person. He needs to be taken care of. Chu Yang smiled. Then I'll be in danger. I might even become a pile of bones before I can grow up. But I'm not willing to be lonely. Chu Yang's slender fingers stroked a piece of bamboo. So, since we're all seniors here, what's wrong with me showing off? Any external appearance is just a performance. What's really important is the result. What I can achieve by being a hooligan, I might not be able to achieve by being a righteous ruler. Similarly, I'm calm and steady in the lower three heavens, but I have to tuck my tail between my legs in the upper three heavens. I've always been very accurate about my position. In the lower three heavens, no one can do anything to me. So in front of everyone, I have the image of someone who has great foresight, because that's the only way people will believe me. But in the upper three heavens, I've become calm and steady, because the upper three heavens is different from the lower three heavens. The martial world in the upper three heavens is chaotic and frivolous. Now that I'm in the upper three heavens, I know how big the world is. So, I immediately changed my position. I'm just a teenager who's about to turn 10 years old. That's all. Everyone is guarding against someone who's full of schemes and schemes. Who would care about a slick teenager? Chu Yang turned back lightly. Now it's not the time for me to be arrogant. Chu Feiyin was dumbfounded. He said repeatedly, I see. After thinking for a while, he didn't give up and asked, then in the upper three heavens, the lower three heavens, and the upper three heavens, which one of you is the real you? Chu Yang tilted his head and thought for a while. Finally he smiled. It's all me, because no matter where I am, no matter what corner I am in, I will be able to enjoy the fun of that corner very quickly. Thus, I can devote myself wholeheartedly. In the lower three heavens, what I enjoy is power. It was the exhilarating feeling of starting from nothing, of starting from scratch, of turning the tables on adversity, and of turning the tides. In the upper three heavens, what I enjoy is secretly planning and advancing step by step. The winds and clouds of the world move for me. What I enjoy is brotherly love and friendship. But in the upper three heavens, what I enjoy is freedom and recklessness. It's a kind of frivolity after I've completely let go. Actually, during this period of time in the upper three heavens, I've been frivolous and sly. It's a kind of fun that I haven't enjoyed since I was young. Chu Yang said deeply and contentedly. Although there are schemes and conflicts here, there's a home, a father and mother, a root and a reliance here. Chu Feiyin didn't speak for a long time. At this moment, he suddenly felt the desolation in Chu Yang's heart. Outside the door, the sound of horse hooves suddenly sounded and rushed in like a gust of wind. Chapter 759. Hearing the sound of horses galloping towards them, both uncle and nephew knew that they were here for divine Dr. Chu. But both of their expressions didn't change. Have you kept the purple crystals well? Chu Feiyin asked. Don't worry, it's much safer with me than with you. Chu Yang smiled. Of course, they still have to be spent through your hands. So if someone comes to me for treatment, I'll go alone. And you set off from here to issue the mission. You'll go alone? Chu Feiyin looked at him with uncertainty. Can you? Chu Yang smiled and pointed to his mouth and hands. My medical skills can determine life and death. And my words are comparable to 100,000 soldiers. Fourth uncle, I'm the king of Hell Chu. Chu Fian laughed. I believe you. King of Hell Chu is indeed the king of Hell Chu. You're really capable. Hurried footsteps came from the door. But the sound of footsteps was consistent. Although the footsteps were hurried, one could clearly hear the calmness of the person. Chu Fian heard the footsteps and smiled. Your father is here. Sure enough, Chu Feiling's voice sounded before he finished. Yang, where are you? Chu Yang replied. I'm here. He asked curiously. Fourth uncle, you can tell from the footsteps? Chu Fian smiled. Your father has always walked like this since he was young. When I was young, your third uncle, and I would lie down at the door and listen. We bet that we wouldn't mistake the footsteps of your brothers. Chu Yang replied with an "oh," and his heart couldn't help but be moved. Just by the footsteps he could tell who it was. How attentive were they? It was enough to show the deep friendship between his father and his brothers. Chu Fian said sadly, actually your second uncle was originally very cute. Before he finished, Chu Feiling rushed in. Yang, come back with me. Many people in the clan are injured. No wonder our people only came now. It turns out that my second uncle went to ask for help. Chu Yang smiled. That's not the case, Chu Feiling said. Your second uncle isn't at home at all. I don't know where he went. After those people were sent home, the old ancestor was alerted. The old ancestor treated them for half a night, but to no avail. Only then did he hear that you could treat them here. But at that time, you were too busy here. If our Chu family transported it over, I'm afraid there would be a fierce conflict on the spot. So the old ancestor ordered us to wait until you were done with your work. Chu Yang frowned. But that way, I'll have to endure another night of pain. If we don't suffer one more night of pain, countless lives will be lost once the conflict breaks out. Which is more important? Chu Feiling said. What's more, the Chu clan is not stable now. It's not good to have a conflict at this juncture. Chu Yang thought for a while. That's true. Then he said, I have some matters to discuss with fourth uncle, and then I'll go home with you immediately. Chu Feiling readily agreed. Chu Yang pulled Chu Fian to his room. He dug under the bed and took out a big parcel. Fourth uncle, go quickly. Chu Fian was almost angered to death. You said that it would be foolproof. But you just put it under the bed so casually? Chu Yang widened his eyes. What's wrong with it? Chu Fian was so angry that his stomach was full of shit. He snatched the parcel, changed his clothes, put on his clothes and jumped over the wall. Then, the sound of horse hooves sounded outside, and he went far away like thunder. Of course, Chu Yang didn't really put it under the bed. That was just a gesture. In fact, he took it out from the tribulation space. But this matter couldn't be explained. Seeing Chu Fian go far away, Chu Yang smiled and went out with Chu Feiling. Chu Feiling cursed loudly and was flustered. This bastard! He rode my horse away. Doesn't he know that there are so many people in the family waiting for you to save them? The older he gets, the more unreliable he is. Chu Yang was stunned. It turned out that the horse that Chu Fian rode away was Chu Feiling's horse. The next moment, Chu Yang only felt his body shake, and he was already in the air. The scenery on both sides was constantly moving backward. It turned out that he was already on Chu Feiling's shoulder and running forward. Father, you run so fast. Chu Yang praised. Chu Feiling slapped his buttocks. Don't call me that. Chu Yang was depressed. He stretched out a hand and rubbed his buttocks. He was extremely sad. Being a person wasn't as good as being a sworn brother. Back then, he was so enthusiastic and fearful. Now he scolded and hit him as soon as he opened his mouth. Thinking about this, he couldn't help but sigh. Why are you sighing? Chu Feiling asked sensitively. I'm thinking about what happened in the three heavens. Things really change quickly. Chu Yang sighed. Chu Feiling immediately shut his mouth and ran forward with a flushed face. But he turned Chu Yang's body over, and his shoulder pressed against Chu Yang's stomach. The whole journey was bumpy. Little brat, who asked you to poke at my scar? Chu Feiling thought fiercely in his heart. Big Boss Chu's stomach was overturned by Chu Yang's shoulder, and he vomited all the way to the Chu clan. I shouldn't have been greedy for a moment of pleasure. Minister Chu was extremely regretful. He didn't expect this old man's temper to be so fiery. He actually managed to get back at him without leaving a trace. In the blink of an eye, Chu Failing landed in the courtyard of the Chu clan like a meteor. His body flashed twice, and he was already in the hall. Chu Yang's martial power hadn't recovered yet, and he was carried so far. When he landed, he immediately felt dizzy. He spun 3 rounds like a top, and only felt that the sky was full of stars and the galaxy was shining in front of him. After vomiting for a while, he woke up from his heavy state. Then he heard screams in the hall. "You're Chu Yang? Failing's child who was left outside?" An elegant voice asked lightly. Chu Failing's voice sounded. "Why aren't you greeting your elder?" Chu Yang turned his head and saw an old man in front of him. He had a thin face, wore a green robe, and had a slender figure. He looked like he was in his 70s. His eyes were looking at him calmly, and he was sizing him up. "Elder." Chu Yang stepped forward, knelt down hurriedly, and kowtowed a few times. He knew that although this old man looked like he was in his 70s, he was estimated to be at least 300 or 400 years old. He was the Chu clan's stabilizing force, and their last pillar of support. He was also the top expert in the entire clan. No need for formalities, get up. The elder sized him up carefully and frowned, saying, "Treat their injuries first. After you're done, let your grandfather send you to me." After he finished speaking, he flicked his green robe and mysteriously disappeared from the hall. Only then did Chu Yang realize that the hall was full of people. His grandfather, Chu Xiongcheng, was standing not far away from him, looking at him with eyes full of gratification. When he came in just now, all his attention seemed to have been attracted by the elder's words, and he didn't notice anything else. It was as if that green figure was the core of the whole world. Other than that, there was nothing else. Chu Yang was shocked. What kind of cultivation is this? The sword spirit exclaimed in Chu Yang's consciousness space, and said, "This elder of your Chu clan has a pretty good cultivation. Why is your Chu clan curled up here? Logically speaking, with such a cultivation base, he should be able to own a larger territory." "Huh?" Chu Yang asked. "The cultivation base of this old ancestor of yours is more than 10 times the cultivation base that Duke Yu is displaying right now," the sword spirit said heavily. "Your elder is about to break through the heavenly man realm and reach the level of martial saint. And this kind of unintentional and soul-stirring aura is the precursor to his breakthrough," the sword spirit said. Actually, he didn't do it deliberately, but at such a moment, he couldn't control the leakage of his aura. How can a real expert be so aggressive? "I see." Chu Yang was shocked. Level of martial saint. In other words, he's already at the peak of the 5th stage of martial saint. Chu Yang was puzzled. Duke Yu is said to be at the peak of the 2nd stage of martial saint, but the elder is only at the 5th stage of martial saint. How can there be a difference of more than 10 times? The sword spirit snorted and said, 10 times is still too little. When one's cultivation reaches the level of martial saint, he can sense the heaven and earth, and comprehend the mysteries of the heaven and earth, as well as the principles of martial arts. Or should I say, a beginner of the 3rd stage of martial saint is twice as powerful as a peak of the 2nd stage of martial saint. There's actually such a big difference. Chu Yang was surprised. It turns out that at this level, the higher one goes, the harder it is. Otherwise, why would a martial saint expert be trapped in a bottleneck for hundreds of years without being able to break through? And he could only die of old age with hatred in his heart. The sword spirit said indifferently, the higher you go on the path of martial arts, the harder it gets. But the harder it is, the greater one's achievements will be after a breakthrough. That makes sense. Chu Yang asked. But why are you so vague? If I remember correctly, you said Duke Yu's current strength, and not Duke Yu's current strength. Why is that? The sword spirit sneered. Duke Yu is the last elf of the heavenly realm after all. Do you think that the race's secret technique is worthless? He doesn't dare to reveal his true strength now. Once he reveals his true strength, he'll be hunted down by the dominant clans and the law enforcers. He can even ignore the laws of the heavenly realm when he's hunting down a foreign clan. Even if there are thousands of Duke Yu, He'll only die tragically before he's fully grown. So, he'd rather be crippled and recultivate than reveal his true strength. I see. Chu Yang nodded seriously. Suddenly, he felt a strong sense of trust. Because Duke Yu didn't hide his identity in front of him, Chu Yang didn't dare to delay. With the help of Chu Xiongqing and the rest, he immediately treated the 10 injured people of the Chu clan. This time, the speed was much faster, and the pain wasn't very great. Although these people were Chu Feilong's men, they were still part of the Chu clan. Before they shed all pretense of cordiality, Chu Yang wouldn't be ruthless. He had been alone for 2 lifetimes, and had finally acknowledged his ancestors and had his own home. No one could understand how much Chu Yang valued the word home. Seeing that everyone had been treated, Chu Xiongqing was elated. The more he looked at Chu Yang, the more he liked him. He patted Chu Yang's shoulder and said, "Let's go, I'll send you to see the elder." This is the first time that he's taken the initiative to ask to see a junior of the clan. You must grasp this opportunity well. Chapter 760. As he said this, Chu Tenghu, who had been keeping his head down, quietly raised his head and glanced at Chu Yang. Then he lowered his eyelids again. This gaze was filled with hatred and jealousy, and it was as cold as a knife. Although Chu Yang's cultivation hadn't recovered yet, his divine sense had almost completely integrated with the divine soul of the first tribulation sword master. He could indeed be called the best in the world. Of course, he had sensed the source of this gaze, and also sensed the unfriendliness of this gaze. But why would Chu Yang care about him now? He turned around calmly, and placed Chu Tenghu and his 2 brothers behind him. I don't even care about your old age, let alone your young age. After informing Chu Feiling, Chu Yang followed Chu Xiongqing into the inner hall under Chu Feiling's proud and smiling gaze. After they left, they turned into a quiet path. Yang, you're very skilled in treating the injuries just now. Chu Xiongqing's broken eyebrows twitched, and looked at Chu Yang with a faint smile. Of course, I wasn't skilled at the beginning, but after a night of practice, I'm finally familiar with it now, Chu Yang said cautiously. He cleverly said that he treated the injuries of other clans as practice. If Chu Xiongqing asked, he would say, I wasn't very good at that time, and I wasn't confident. He would block the path in advance. Chu Xiongqing didn't expect this grandson to play tricks. He asked in a low voice, I don't care if you're practicing or not. I only want to ask you, were you involved in the incident 2 nights ago? The incident 2 nights ago? What incident? Chu Yang was surprised. Then he suddenly realized, Grandfather, are you talking about the incident of the big clans being attacked? Chu Xiongqing stared at him with eagle-like eyes and asked in a low voice, were you involved? Chu Yang felt wronged and shouted, Grandfather, if I did it, would I still hide it from you? This is a matter of life and death for the clans. I really didn't do it. It has nothing to do with me. He thought I really didn't do it. It was the sword spirit who did it. Chu Xiongqing snorted and said, Then how did you know about this treatment method? When I was in the lower 3 heavens, godly Dr. Du Shiqing once gave me a copy of the medical sage's medicine canon. In the lower 3 heavens in the northern wastelands, I accidentally broke into a cave. The stone walls of the cave were engraved with the methods to break and neutralize all the sinister techniques from the past 10,000 years. Chu Yang did not even blink. He spoke sincerely with a heart-wrenching tone and an aggrieved face. It was the kind of depression that came from being suspected after doing a good deed. In fact, his eyes were about to burst into tears. Old Master Chu couldn't bear it anymore. Sigh, look at what I've done to my grandson. Looks like it really isn't him. Since it's not you, you should lie low for the time being. Even if someone is suspicious, this old man will stand up for you. Chu Yang said naively. Don't tell me that they don't feel the least bit grateful that I saved them? Are you going to deal with me instead? Old Master Chu stroked his beard and sighed. What a pure and innocent child. How can things be so simple in this world? Receiving a drop of water from someone should be repaid with a gushing spring. Repaying the debt of saving a life for a lifetime doesn't exist anymore. The way of the world now is strength. Chu Yang said angrily, This is too unfair. Patting his shoulder, Old Master Chu said earnestly, When you grow up, You will understand. Young Master Chu muttered in a daze. How can it be like this? How can it be like this? How can they be like this? Old Master Chu sighed deeply. He felt that he was a failure. The reality that he said had polluted Sun Xiaochun's pure and innocent heart. This was a huge blow to this child's pure and innocent nature. Hopefully, this child will be able to recognize the evil ways of the world as soon as possible. The path gradually became desolate. Wild grass grew on both sides of the path, and wild flowers swayed in the wind. Rows and rows of all kinds of tall trees stood upright. Each tree was as thick as a few people hugging it. The branches were lush and full of birds' nests. The ground was covered with a layer of birds' nests. Walking on it, one could hear rustling sounds. It was unknown how many years it had been since it was cleaned. Walking on this desolate path, one couldn't help but feel that everything was quiet and tranquil. It was as if one was far away from the mortal world. In this wonderful feeling, the two of them didn't want to talk. They walked forward in silence. Only the sound of their own footsteps could be heard. The two of them had a feeling that this frequency could extend to the ends of the world. The sword spirit sighed somewhat disappointedly and said, "See, this is the place where the strong should live. Away from the ostentatiousness, away from the hustle and bustle. Alone, accompanying the world day after day, year after year, painstakingly comprehending the mysteries of life, martial arts, and the heavenly Tao, until one's own flesh and blood wither along with the flowers and trees, turning into soil and wind, and returning to the earth. Everyone knows that the strong can move unhindered in the world. They can turn their hands over and create clouds and rain with a flip of their hands. They are unrivaled and unrivaled. How majestic and domineering is that? But who would have thought that behind this majestic and domineering aura, there's 1,000 years of loneliness that can't be dispelled?" Chu Yang felt bitter and disappointed in his heart. He asked softly, "Don't tell me they don't have wives? They don't have lovers to accompany them throughout their lives? They don't have unforgettable feelings?" "They do." The sword spirit sighed deeply and said, "But they're just like everything on the ground. The only thing that can accompany them is some memories that will never fade from their hearts. Otherwise, why is it said that it's lonely at the top?" Chu Yang was silent. So before this, among all the strong people, only a very small number of couples can reach the peak together. Such a couple may not appear, even once in tens of thousands of years. The sword spirit seemed to be on guard against something, and also seemed to be sighing. So, usually such strong people walk the emotionless path. Because if they're obsessed with love, after their loved ones have passed away for so long, just the deep feelings of love in the past are enough to drive them crazy. How can they survive the long hundreds of years that follow? So, the emotionless path master is in charge of everything in the Chongtiang continent. The sword spirit was a little worried. "But you practice the emotionless path and go against the tradition of tens of thousands of years. I hope that you don't know that you..." As he spoke, the sword spirit couldn't continue. He could only let out a long sigh. "I look at the world with my eyes and my heart. I'm willing to be bitter and happy. If I don't become the moon in the Chongtiang continent, I won't be afraid of the difficulties of reincarnation." Chu Yang said quietly. The sword spirit was silent. He let out a long sigh. "I'm willing to indulge myself, and I'm willing to be with my loved ones and my brothers regardless of the difficulties and hardships in the world. Even if I end up as high as the moon in the Chongtian continent, as long as my loved ones pass away, I'll accompany them in reincarnation." This was Chu Yang's answer. Who doesn't know that love is priceless? But the heavenly Tao is emotionless. You're so sentimental. What will happen in the future? The sword spirit thought silently. The two of them came to the end. It was a small courtyard. It was very simple and crude. The surrounding walls were full of withered grass. There were layers of yellow and green grass. It was so crowded that the soil on the walls couldn't be seen. Cracks were opened by the grass roots. It looked as if the wall was about to collapse. The grass on the top of the wall was even more lush. It actually sprang up a few feet and swayed in the wind. The two wooden doors were obviously made of red sandalwood. Seeing these two wooden doors, Chu Yang was sure that this elder was probably more than 300 to 400 years old as he had guessed. He should be at least 700 years old, because some parts of this hard red sandalwood couldn't withstand the wind and frost, and there were large traces of decay. And Chu Yang knew that if this red sandalwood was used carefully and placed in a room, it wouldn't change even after 1,000 years. Although these wooden doors have been tempered by the wind and rain outside, to be able to reach such a state, it was enough to show that they had been here for a long time. There was only one thing that was very strange. If this elder could live for such a long time, why was there no one below him? Chu Xiongqing finally said, "I'll send you here. You can go in by yourself. The elder only wants to see you." Chu Yang said, "Yes." He stretched out his hand and knocked on the wooden door. It was silent inside. Chu Yang exerted some force, and the wooden door opened with a creak, revealing a courtyard full of weeds. Then Chu Yang walked in. He turned around and closed the wooden door with another creak, leaving Chu Xiongqing outside. He also closed the 1,000 years of loneliness outside the door. Chu Xiongqing stared blankly for a long time before he turned around and left. Chu Yang turned around. The withered grass in the courtyard was very thick. The newly grown weeds were very tall. On average, they could reach the height of his waist. Chu Yang pushed them aside carefully. He tried his best to step on the withered grass and walked forward. There was a soft voice inside. "Step on the green grass. Don't step on my withered grass." Chu Yang was startled and did as he was told. He suddenly felt a little sour in his heart. "Step on the green grass. Don't step on my withered grass." From this sentence, it could be seen that this elder was a sentimental person. Perhaps in his heart, these dead withered grass without vitality were just like his loved ones and brothers who had passed away in the prime of his life. Chu Yang suddenly understood the real reason why the elder didn't let anyone clean the courtyard. It was because he couldn't let go. The green grass under Chu Yang's feet creaked and fell. After Chu Yang walked over, they stood up again. Although they were a little slanted, they didn't affect their vitality. There were 3 thatched huts in the courtyard. The wooden door was wide open. The stone steps in front of the door were full of moss. On the left, there was a big green rock that was densely covered with moss. On the right, there was a big vat that was filled with rainwater. No one knew how many years it had been since it was cleaned. The vat had turned dark green, and tiny red worms were rolling around in it. "Come in," the voice said faintly. Chu Yang finally stepped in. He stepped into this place that was full of mysteries and legends to a young martial artist. It was a place where martial saints lived. It was full of the fragrance of grass and wood. It was very clean. There was a bed, a table, and a chair in the room. Obviously, the elder didn't plan to entertain guests here. So there wasn't even a place to sit. This place belonged to him alone. On the side wall, an ancient painting was hanging quietly. On the painting, there was a young girl with bright eyes and white teeth. Her eyes were full of affection as she silently watched everything in this thatched hut. The elder was dressed in green. He was standing quietly in front of this painting, looking at the person in the painting. His back was facing Chu Yang. He was motionless like a statue. His back view revealed infinite desolation and loneliness. Could it be that he had spent these hundreds of years looking at this painting? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.